Tuesday, January the 13th, Tyler, ahead as we are navigating the month of January. It feels like we're kind of coming out of a fog now.
A little bit. We're hitting our stride.
The football, well, I say it because, like, last night was the night I started to be like, all right, football's winding down. One college game left. We got through the incredible weekend that was the wild card weekend. We're chugging along to the Super Bowl. It feels like, now we do have some portal news today, but it feels like the portal is settling down, that things are finding the way. We had some quarterback news yesterday. You've got some NASCAR news we're going to get to, and I say that because NASCAR is a month away.
Yeah, well, the Clash is February 1st.
Okay, yeah.
So only a couple weeks away.
So I feel like we're setting up the NASCAR season.
Yeah.
Golf is getting set up with the Brooks Koepka news. So it feels like we're transitioning officially. You know, there's always that initial period of 2026 where you're like, where am I at? What am I doing? Okay, that was over.
Yeah.
Quick reflection points on how 2025 went. Yeah. And it feels like now, after last night, you tell me if I'm wrong, we're now transitioning. But also, by the way, I say all that because I went to watch basketball last night. Like, this is about the time where I'm like, ooh, conference basketball.
Wasn't a whole lot on.
And there was nothing on. It was I watched the Hurricanes last night try to rally from a 3-0 deficit to the Devils. Yeah, not the Devils, the Red Wings.
If we're looking over the next couple weeks, you get the 4 divisional round games. You'll get the national championship on Monday. Then you get the 2 conference championships and the Super Bowl. You got 8 meaningful football games left to be stretched out over the next basically 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And, again, football's a volume sport. My mentor in radio, Jeff Dancer, taught me very on, football is best when there's more of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm a firm believer in that as we get down these last couple weeks. Yes, all these games mean a lot. It's win or go home. You're pursuing championships, winning championships. But, man, you know, it's just not quite the same when you only have 2 games to look forward to on a Saturday or a Sunday compared to a full slate that we get used to for the 3 months between, September and December.
Yeah, and, again, so it feels, we'll address a lot of that today because a lot going on. In football, I mentioned the transfer portal. There is news there for South Carolina. They lose another offensive lineman. Now, it's becoming like truly fascinating.
Now you look around like, why haven't y'all left yet?
Yeah.
Y'all still here?
Yeah, you're like, basically, all right, guys, stop. Like, what do y'all, did y'all have a calendar of like, oh, today's my day? I got to announce today, tomorrow is your day. Like, I'm really intrigued by this because it is what it is. And we'll tell you, Ryan Brubaker, who I sat here, of course, when you do this for almost July will be 10 years that I've sat here in this studio Monday through Friday and done some form of a radio show. You're bound to have bad takes, right? Somewhere along the line, you've messed up and you've said something that you regret. And in 10 years, I've probably quadrupled that. I'd say about 5 a year.
You've never been wrong. It's teams and players and other people that have let you down. Remember that.
Very true.
Remember that.
I appreciate you looking at it in that shape and that mind. But with that being said, Ryan Brubaker was a guy that I was very high on. And thought kind of would come in. And I really thought Ryan Brubaker way back when would be the start of the turnaround on the offensive line, if you will. And he just could never get healthy. So it's not a loss in that regard, Tyler. But what I find interesting on this here is you're completely like, when we talked about this in like November and early December, like, boy, the offensive line's got to be completely remade. I was like, all right, if you guys leave here, if you guys leave there, whatever, you bring in some new guys. I didn't anticipate an entire room change out.
Yeah, this is a little bit towards the extreme end of it. And look, Brubaker, again, he's dealt with injuries for most of his career here at Carolina, hasn't played a ton. I don't think he's ever started a game in his time here either. He would have been a depth piece. He would have been somebody to fill out that room, provide you a 2 or a 3, depending on what spot, you have him at. And now you're having to go to the portal and get that. And I believe with him leaving, that brings the number in the room down to 14. I think
is that total counting guys coming in? And
guys, at the last count, I believe you got 14 total bodies in that room right now when you count Shivers and now Brubaker leaving over the last couple of days. And I want to say Beamer said like 16 or 17 was kind of the ideal number because that at least gives you 3 deep, right? If you're talking about an A, B, and a C squad when it comes to the offensive line, you have that with a couple of reserves mixed in there. So more opportunity is, again, they've done a phenomenal job getting guys out of the portal so far, and you can still do that. So probably a few more spots you can add there to kind of round out that depth. But, yeah, you're talking about a room that's flipped about 90% up to this point.
Yeah, so We'll talk about that today. Tyler's got some numbers on the offensive line because, Tyler, I think now I'm really interested in the running backs. This football team now is evolving to, like, my interest level, my excitement level is going to be as high as it's been, but not because I have these huge expectations for 2026. It's because you're going to flip the room. You're going to flip the whole thing with a new offensive coordinator, with a new offensive line coach, potentially with different running backs. Like, did the wide receivers take it? Does Nick Harper take another step forward? What does Clayton White do? There's a fascination with this team as to truly what in the heck are we going to get in 2026?
There's an excitement from newness, right? And again, I give Beamer credit because I think that he's done about as good of a job as he can in the almost 2 months since the season's ending of doing everything right when it comes to making hires, when it came to the high school recruiting class, now what he's done in the portal so far, because we were down. We were very, very down on where this team was by season's end. Again, go 4-8 and lose to your rival Clemson the way that they did. You're going to feel that way naturally, but again, he's checked seemingly every single box so far with more opportunities to add guys out of the transfer portal where, again, you're not going to be as highly discussed nationally as you were a year ago because you're coming off a disappointing season. But I think here locally, everybody's going to be very excited for all the newness, all the change, and which of these guys come in for the portal. Because, again, just based on numbers, not all these guys can be contributors. You brought in 6 offensive linemen. There's only 5 spots. That means at least one of those guys is probably not going to be playing a whole lot this year, in addition to the guys that you have returning, like Shed Surratt, who we expect to factor in to being a starter once again this year. But there's excitement to figure out who it is. Again, we'll go through spring practice, figure out what they have there, camp and all that kind of stuff. And Kent State and Towson give you 2 opportunities to experiment a lot. So by the time Mississippi State's the first conference game, or second.
Yep, that's Steve Tannehill weekend.
Steve Tannehill weekend.
September 19th is the game. September 18th is that Friday.
We'll still be asking a lot of questions going into that game of what exactly everything is and how it's going to stack up against the first quality opponent you'll see.
So we'll talk more about that. Again, Tyler's got some offensive line numbers that we'll get into and kind of review because you're going to have for at least 4 new starters, and we'll kind of see where everything kind of takes itself from there. But with all that being said, we'll get more into that as we go through the show. Last night, Monday Night Football, I couldn't get into it. That Texans Steelers, so I had it on kind of in the background, kind of around. But with all this being said, didn't anticipate the Texans blowing the Steelers completely out of the water, and that potentially being the way I watch Aaron Rodgers go out. A quarterback that in my lifetime was the transitional quarterback from Brett Favre for the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting it to be a low-scoring slog, which on one end it was. Now, Texans did have 2 defensive scores in that game, which made it a little bit more lopsided than it was. But 2 teams that the strength of them is defense, and the Texans have a really good defense. Steelers always have a solid defense themselves. But, yeah, they just kind of smothered them throughout the entire game. Didn't get over 200 yards of offense, only scored the 2 field goals, and both those times they got into the red zone but couldn't get it in the end zone. And, yeah, is that the end of Aaron Rodgers' career? Throws a pick 6 late in the game. Is that kind of the last memory we're going to have of him? I don't know. Is that the last time Mike Tomlin coaches the Pittsburgh Steelers? I would lean towards yes, but we don't know yet. We'll see what ends up coming out in the next couple games. But it was definitely for an organization that is as storied as the Steelers are with Super Bowls and all this great lineage, and again the history of having 3 head coaches in the past 50 years or whatever. That didn't look like a team that was headed in the right direction. No. Yeah, again, they got over the bridge of not having a losing season. They managed to win the AFC North in that wild game against the Ravens last Sunday night, but there's no reason for me to think that they're suddenly going to turn themselves back into a Super Bowl contender with the way things are. They haven't won a playoff game in a decade.
Yeah, I look, in my opinion, everything has an expiration date. Everything. And I think, my personal opinion, in the minutes that I did watch that game last night, especially towards the end, because even though it was a blowout, I paid maybe a little bit more attention. I was like, all right, is this the end for Aaron Rodgers? Is this the last thing I'm going to see? And that's a franchise that, as you just mentioned, is built on winning not divisional championships, not conference championships. They're built on winning Super Bowls. And when you're nowhere close to that, you don't sit around and go, 10-8, 10-7 is working, 9-8 is working. They got to be in Super Bowl contention, and it felt like watching the Steelers, who are I don't know if we'd label them America's team. I get it. There's a team down in Dallas that wants to take that title.
They have a very large fan base.
Exactly.
And you can find Steelers fans anywhere.
And so with that being said, watching them like last night, it feels like that organization you pay a little bit more attention to if that was like Jacksonville,
Yeah.
or even a Buffalo, that you're like, all right, well, got to blow that thing up,
Sure.
because Pittsburgh is a staple, I think, of the NFL. And with that being said, so interesting last night. We'll get a little bit more into that today.
Elijah and Preston had a caller this morning that I think nailed it when he said you got beat by Steelers football because the Texans came in and they were hitting the crap out of the Steelers last night through physical defense, stuffed you in a locker, which is what the Steelers used to do for all those years they were having success. So you got beat by a version of yourself that you used to be. So now it's time to look in the mirror and say, okay, what Rooney family, what do we do from here?
And we'll kind of monitor it. Who knows? Tyler brought up a good point. We're talking about Aaron Rodgers. That'll take probably a few weeks to work itself out, I think.
Well, he's got to go in his little hut, and he's got to meditate and smoke something and, figure himself out.
Mike Tomlin, on the other hand.
That'll be pretty quick.
We might want to keep an eye on that for the next 3 hours and keep refreshing their old Twitter machine. 803-404-6100. You can weigh in this afternoon. We'll get into some of this offensive line stuff. Got a question on the text line about culture. I'll get to that. And we'll talk a little bit about the numbers Tyler has for this. Also, South Carolina yesterday becoming TCU East maybe a little bit on the offensive staff.
Yeah, no kidding. A lot of continuity and carryover for Briles is going to feel very comfortable in his first year as the OC.
Switching out, is it purple and silver? Purple and black more? Is it more purple and silver that you think?
They're purple and black.
Okay. I didn't know what they would label as their, I know purple, but I didn't know what
Purple's a very underrated, primary team color.
Very interesting take.
I'm a fan of purple.
Okay.
My middle school, we were purple and black.
Really?
I've always had an affinity for purple with the Panthers.
Okay.
So I've always had an affinity for the Ravens and stuff, teams that use purple. So shout out to TCU.
Say purple a couple times and let that word confuse you there as we get you going here on a Tuesday. January the 13th. Tyler Head, Captain Dave Adair. Captain Dave and I have got our big fluffy jackets on. We're ready for the day. Hope you're doing well on a Tuesday. We'll get into South Carolina's offensive line. Talk a little bit about South Carolina Christian University. Now, maybe on the offensive side, but I'll explain that. You're listening to the Halftime Show. 12:18 on a Tuesday, January the 13th. Tyler Head, Captain David Aaron, myself, Bill Gunner, as we carry you on through here, as we were saying, almost to the halfway point of January. We'll be out on Monday for Martin Luther King Day, so set your calendars accordingly. We will enjoy the weekend and prep for the national championship game, Miami and Indiana, and then we'll be back on Tuesday to break it all down, analyze it, overanalyze it, tell you things that you already knew, all the fun things that come along with a national championship football game.
Is Indiana the new dynasty? How long does this run go?
Kirk Cignetti's living the spotlight right now. Cash in.
Yeah. Hold
Indiana's feet to the fire. They got money.
They do.
I know he's already been able to acquire some of it, but now would be the time.
Yeah. His name will be the one in every single coaching cycle every single year. Back up the Brinks truck to him.
That's
throw
right.
the money at him. College football, NFL, everybody's going to want to go after Kirk Cignetti. I think it just stays at Indiana.
Will he ever get more publicity than this? Is this peak publicity?
I think it's peak publicity. He's always going to be relevant.
Right.
Because, again, I don't think Indiana's going anywhere. But, we're still in, the stage of I can't believe what we're witnessing for a program that was irrelevant. Again, losing his program in college football 2 years ago. I saw a picture the other day of his first game he ever coached there. It wasn't even close to half full. There are more people in the parking lot tailgating than actually in the stadium, and now they're playing for it and, quite frankly, likely going to win the national championship on Monday, in my opinion.
So we'll see how that plays out. We'll talk about that again next Tuesday, and again, a reminder, we'll be off on Monday. But much like he cashed in, Shane Beamer kind of was able to cash in last year on 9 wins on the popularity of Lenore Sillers. And, hey, look, if I'm a college football coach, I'm all for it. And if I'm an AD, whatever. You got to deal with it. Now Shane Beamer's got to deal with 4-8, though. And part of that is revamping an offensive line that really for the better part of my lifetime has been a failure, Tyler. And, I think every year we overhype it. We want the offensive line to be better. There's really, honestly, reasons that we have hyped it up the way we have the last few years, because when you recruit on paper, the way South Carolina's recruited, you go, this should be a good line. It's why I also am almost convinced that it's more coaching than it was the actual players. And I think, aside from Tree Babalade, that next year is going to prove that out when you say, I think Trevon Ball is going to have a good year. Josiah Thompson is going to go to Miami and turn into something really good. I think you're going to see Nick Sharp maybe at Michigan State be a full-time starter. Who knows? If Boaz Stanley goes to Purdue and turns into a really good center, then
you'll say, okay.
We look at Lonnie Teasley and go, you owe us some money and a couple muffin baskets for what you did here. That was criminal. But now South Carolina has to revamp this entire offensive line. It looks like on paper, Shed Surratt lines up as the only guy coming back that would be penciled in as a starter. And pencil is going to be the key word here because the eraser can be used. Marquis Anderson's back. But going to your point, you've got numbers on some of these new linemen coming in and how it also works alongside what Kendall Briles likes to do from a tempo standpoint.
Yeah, and we'll get the quote here from Kendall Briles. Again, I played this about a month ago when he got hired. This was from a coaching clinic he did a couple years ago when he was at TCU, explaining his offensive philosophy. And this specific quote is talking about the tempo and quite frankly, what he expects out of his offensive linemen and how they work within the system. So cut number 10, Dave.
We play with one ball. That's what we want to do. So when we start a drive, we're going to try to play with one football, okay? And we'll talk about it, but you got to involve your managers on that as well. But when we start the drive, we need to play with one football. Obviously, there's going to be stoppage. There's going to be things that happen defensively. They're going to flop on you, okay? That's going to happen. There's going to be penalties, all that type of stuff. And you can exchange the ball, and then if it's a weather situation, you can play with a different ball. But we want to try to play with one football. When we start a drive. Skilled players get the ball to the center judge. You guys know that. Center take the lead. It's imperative that your center is an intelligent guy that understands the tempo and knows how to go find where the ball is going. If it's out of bounds to the left, get to the left hash. You know where it's going to be. Find the line judge, get set, so those other guys can get set off of you. Nobody else is going to get down. The right guard ain't going to get his big ass down until you get your hand on the ball, and then the left tackle is going to, all that's going to happen after you get down, okay? So he's got to be fast, being able to get down.
So, again, talking about what he expects as an offensive lineman there, and I've been keeping up with this as they brought guys in the portal of just how fast the offenses these guys have played in, because, again, TCU, when Kendall Briles there using the veer and shoot offense, runs up tempo, runs a lot of really quick stuff. This past year, they ranked 32nd in the nation in seconds per play at 24.6 seconds between plays. Again, getting on the ball, getting moving, and making those next plays happen. And when you look at these guys that came in from the transfer portal, not a lot of them with a ton of experience in up-tempo offenses. The best is Emmanuel Poku, Koji Poku, whatever we're going to call him, coming over from ECU, John David Baker, the offense coordinator at ECU, who was also in the mix for the job here at Carolina. They ranked 4th in the nation in seconds per play in the 2 years that Poku started for them. So very experienced when it comes to playing in an up-tempo offense. Shouldn't have any problem adapting. Hank Purvis coming over for Purdue. They were actually 35th this past year, so right in there in line around where TCU was in terms of seconds per play. So good experience for him there. But a lot of these other guys, like Jacarius Peak, the offensive tackle from NC State, they were 85th, 129th, and 110th in his 3 years there as a starter, so not too fast. Carter Miller coming over from UCF, and again, he's bounced around to a bunch of different places, but they were 80th at UCF this year, 130th at ULM Monroe, and 91st at JMU a couple years ago in terms of the type of offense and tempo that they run. Dane Arnett from Ferris State, of course, that's Division II, and Seth Smith from NIU at the FCS level. Couldn't find the numbers for them in terms of the overall tempo. Both of those teams pretty close in terms of plays per game. So TCU ran 71 plays per game this past year. Ferris State ran 67, and then NIU ran 68. So that's the only metric I can go off of with those guys. But again, not a ton of experience in the super up-tempo offenses, which is something that Randy Clements is going to have his, job to do in terms of getting these guys up to speed with where they need to be with this offense.
So do you feel, so when you say that, because here's the narrative that I feel like is being pushed on me. Oh, we're recruiting guys that fit the system. We're recruiting. Those guys, Thompson, Ball, Babalade, Shivers, they didn't fit the system. They don't know. They don't work with Kendall Briles. Got to get rid of those guys. Then A, they're bad. B, they don't fit. The guys we're bringing in, they fit. Oh, look at this. They are all right there. But what I hear you saying, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because this becomes a more interesting conversation, is, yeah, these are just linemen. They don't necessarily fit what Kendall Briles is trying to do, what he likes to accomplish. Now, by the way, I loved his speech there. We play with one ball. I'd like to know more about the option to play with 2 balls or 3 balls there on how they're doing
Well, he's saying you don't give the opportunity for them to switch, and you always give it to the center judge so he can line it up and get them the ball and go with the next play. And I'm looking at it from a standpoint of this one specific metric. And look, Randy Clements is going to know more about the nuances of offensive line play than any of us are. So there's a lot of elements and a lot of attributes to offensive linemen that I'm sure he looks at when he sees these guys on tape, more than just what type of offenses they played in. But I do think it is worth noting that really only one of them has played, or I guess Purvis for 2 in his year at Purdue. 2 of the 6 you've gotten so far really have experience in a really fast up-tempo type of offense. Not saying these other guys aren't capable of getting there, but it is something worth noting as we go into this offseason, spring ball, camp, and all that kind of stuff coming up later this year, that these guys are going to have to get used to.
How long do you? I mean, we're ballparking this. We're not professionals. We didn't play college football. We definitely didn't play offensive line. How long do you think it takes? Because I'm trying to judge this myself, because there's a lot of expectations on this season, and with all that being said, you're going to have. We're going to get into this a little bit today on that spring game and some stuff that was put out yesterday as it pertains to the potential of the spring game. But you get at least 14 practices and maybe a mock 15th if it's a spring game, or an actual 15th practice, plus the fall. I feel like that's a lot to start asking that offensive line, which is actually why I do value. If there's one huge reason, Tyler, we got that phone call yesterday as it pertained to not playing Miami. One huge, actual good reason, you switch out the team that's playing for the national championship in Miami for a cupcake in Kent State that allows you 4 extra quarters to really hone your craft.
And I will say, just in modern college football, everybody runs tempo to some degree. I imagine all these guys have experience running some form of tempo at some point. It's just doing it sustained throughout the entire game that this offense that Kendall Briles is going to bring in is something that maybe it's going to be a little bit new to him. So it's not a completely foreign concept. It's just doing it more than they have in the past, I think, is going to be the learning curve. And again, that's not the end-all be-all of making somebody good or bad within the system. It's just out of the metrics I can find, because offensive line, again, is the unsung heroes. We usually don't talk about them unless they're messing up. Of things that I can go and find numbers on, this is the one thing that stands out to me.
So let's go back. The guy, because he pointed it specifically, was the center. What did you have on Carter Miller.
Yeah, so, and again, he's bounced around.
Well, he has been a good point.
Yeah, bounced around. So it was the Central Florida, UL Monroe, and James Madison played for Kurt Signetti there. The UCF offense this past year was the fastest he played, and they were 80th in tempo this past year. So, and again, if he is your starter, again, it seems like that is the position that's going to need to be the most adept to this, because you're the one getting on the ball. You're the one, as he said, nobody else is going to get set till the center gets set. So
right.
You have to be the first one on and get down in your stance to get everybody else ready to go. So we'll see what challenge, if that is going to be for Carter Miller, if he does end up being your assumed starting center.
And with all that being said, as you just said, your potential starting center, because I think Marquis Anderson could factor into that. Yep. Brubaker might have factored into that if he was healthy.
And Nolan Hayes coming back. He started at center a couple games last year. All these guys that they brought in so far are versatile. They've all played multiple positions. And, I mean, I think we look at Ja'Karius Speak and say, okay, that's probably going to be your starting left tackle more likely than not.
Should be.
But all these other guys could be interior, play the other tackle spot, play center. Like, you're going to have an opportunity to do a lot of different things with these guys, which is good.
Brad weighs in and says you don't need experience to fit his system. It's just going directly to the line of scrimmage instead of the huddle. But the point about that is you got to be in shape and you got to be accustomed to that up-tempo offense. And, experience, it matters. You can't just shrug it off and say, no, it doesn't experience. Yeah, it matters. And in this league, it matters maybe a little more to most because you've got to be on the same page. I mean, I don't think you can just say, no, experience doesn't matter. It does.
Yeah.
To what level? Okay. Yeah. Again, I think that right now that level is being told to us by the coaching staff, not quite as much, but I think you got to have some experience.
And again, maybe it's not a concern at all, but just on what we can go off of right now with the numbers that are available to us, that is just something that I found interesting in my researching of these guys.
803-404-6100. Come back, get a few more of these text messages, and continue some offensive line discussion. It is the Halftime Show. Bill Gunner for Old Timey Meat Market. That's right. It is the wintertime, not necessarily grilling season. I love me a good grilling season, but right now, because of the weather, you might be doing a little more indoor cooking. But guess what? That doesn't mean you stop making trips to Old Timey Meat Market. They've still got phenomenal cuts of meat, whether it's steak, pork, maybe some delicious chicken. Maybe you want to do a little salmon tonight in the oven. Well, guess what? Old Timey Meat Market has you taken care of. And not only that, what is underrated at Old Timey Meat Market is their homemade soup. That's right. Go check out. They make them fresh. They're from scratch, and you don't know what exactly you're going to get because they got all kinds of different ones, and they put them in the freezer, and you can purchase a gallon jug, and you're going to be thrilled with that decision on a nice cold night. Go find out for yourself at one of their 3 locations. St. Andrews Road in Irmo, the South Congaree store, of course, the Lexington store, the one that I'm kind of personal, my favorite. But go visit Old Timey Meat Market today and find that next great dinner. Tell them Bill Gunner sent you. 12:35 on a Tuesday. Tyler Head, Captain David Ayer, Bill Gunner talking right now about the offensive line for South Carolina because I don't. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. I have no, and you don't either. Nobody does. We'll all circle back to this question in about 10 months, around October 13th, and be like, well, that worked. They replaced everybody, and look at them. They're doing well. Or we'll look at it and be like, whew, that experiment has failed dramatically.
I think how you feel about this over the next 9 months depends on if you're a glass half full or glass half empty type of person, where if you're an eternal optimist, you'll be like, oh, man, they got out all the guys that weren't working, brought in new guys, brought in new offensive line coach. This is going to be phenomenal. It's going to work out great. If you're pessimistic, you say, nobody builds an entire offensive line in the portal and has it work right out of the gate. This is going to be a problem. So depending on how you look at the world.
Texter weighs in, says, I know Brubaker was decimated by injuries throughout his career, but he got healthy at the end of the season. He is a bright kid and very athletic for his size, and I thought sure he could excel in Briles' system. Yeah, I don't know. I'm with that texter, but I don't know for certain. But I do agree with that line of thinking, but we'll never know.
And for a lot of these guys that have left, especially ones that weren't playing as much like a Brubaker or a Shivers, they look at this and say, hey, I'm a certain type of offensive lineman that's worked in this specific type of system the past couple of years. Do I want to learn something new, or do I want to go find somewhere else that's a little bit more adapt to what I already know, to where I don't have to go through the process of figuring out an entirely new offense this late in my career?
I don't. Here's the thing with it. This is interesting because sometimes we come up with our own narrative to make it work. That's what us sports media guys do, right? Like we're like, we're going to come up with a narrative and we're going to push it. And right now that narrative being shoved by a lot of people, system, alignment and system. I don't know. I've done radio now. My daughter's 16. I started 1 month before she was born, so it's easy for me to keep track. I've never in my lifetime talked about offensive linemen fitting a system and how people recruit offensive linemen, right? Like never once.
Yeah.
All the years I did recruiting, I never once asked a lineman, hey, you're choosing between South Carolina and so-and-so. How does that system, how they run their offensive line and the system they run, how does it fit your needs versus, let's just say, a Clemson or a Tennessee? Now, all of a sudden, we're coming up with like, you got to have the guys in the system that fit. Well, we'll find out, but it is interesting, and I agree with you. How you want to judge what South Carolina is doing, I think, speaks a lot to your optimistic or pessimistic side. Like, how do you view the tenure of Shane Beamer? Do you believe in him a little bit? And you're like, all right, I think this can work. This time he made good hires. Or are you like, nah, this guy, like we got a text in yesterday, like basically saying, well, Lamont Paris, who's not done well, has done a better job than Shane. If you're going to go down that path, you're just not going to believe in anything he does until you see with your own eyes.
Right, yeah, and until they're, a 10-win team and being put into the college football playoff, you're probably not going to have too much belief in it. But again, when you look at what they've retained, again, we talked about the big three. We talked about Brownlow Dindy being kind of that fourth guy. I really, and I always go back to the phrase that Wes has coined with healthy transfers. You did lose some guys that gave you production this year. Dre Jacobs being towards the top of the list of that. But then you look and say, okay, you also got Nitro Tuggle out of the portal. Like, I think that's pretty comparable to what you lost, where you don't feel like there's a glaring hole in your wide receiver room now because of what you got coming in. We'll see what Jaden Gibson's going to be. Obviously, he's a guy that's dealt with injuries over the past couple of years, so if he can give you anything, then that's a plus. You already know what you're getting back with Nick Harbor. We'll see what some of those younger guys like Jaden Sellers can do in their second year here at South Carolina. So there is a lot of, you are not wrong if you're going to spend this offseason being very optimistic about this team, because there's a lot of positive things that we look at right now and say, okay, I see how this can go well.
And I'll be honest, I'll take the other side of that. There's a lot of things, if you want to be pessimistic, that I right now can't argue with you. I don't know if I'll agree with you, but I just can't argue with you. Another texter weighs in. Brian up in Winston-Salem, thank you for listening up there, says this coming football season with the new additions, stadium upgrades, and Nike equals hashtag the fix in 26.
It is. There is kind of an element of everything changing at once that can kind of maybe wash away the negativity a little bit. Again, the type of jersey that you're wearing and what the stadium looks like has no bearing on what happens on the field. But just from an overall standpoint, when everything is changing, you change the offense, you change the jerseys, you change the stadium, it just feels like a breath of fresh air to a degree. Now, again, it's going to be a long process for the stadium changing, but still.
Let's go to this text because I think this is a big picture question, and hadn't thought about anything like this, and this text has got me thinking. So let's walk through this. I'm going to say something that's probably really stupid just because I'm reading this text, and I'm trying to figure out how to answer it. So let's work through this together. What, if anything, does the number and makeup of South Carolina football transfer portal departure say about the culture of South Carolina football? Should fans be persuaded that South Carolina has a solid or superior culture, and is culture an overrated past virtue now replaced by dollar-driven individualism? And the reason I come to this question, I think it's a great one, is because it is something we've touted, we've promoted with the Shane Beamer program. Look at that culture. Oh, my God. Did you see the videos, Tyler? Look at they're together. There's a unity unlike I've ever seen. They're playing for the coach. And I know I'm guilty of saying it at the end of a season, this year being just as much. Wow, that is a culture thing when Shane Beamer is keeping these kids together when there's almost nothing to play for. However, I think it's a great question because when guys leave at the end of the year. So I'm trying to decipher what is culture in college football and how it relates to your program and how you use it to fit when you do have an era of, as this texture says, dollar-driven individualism.
I don't think culture is something you can apply across the board as much as maybe you used to. And you're right. One of the positive things we talk about is the fact that this team was playing for nothing in the last couple of games of the season, and they still went out there and played their butts off. Dylan Stewart still went out there and played. There were some questions about him and if he would pack it in for the season or whatever. So they went out there and gave Coach Beamer 110%, which is good. I think when you talk about the portal, because it is so transactional now, I really don't know how much culture comes into play. Could you give a team a discount because the culture is really good there? Maybe, but if I'm a high level wide receiver, right, and I got one school coming after me that wants to offer me $2 million, and South Carolina is only going to offer me $500,000, I'm probably not going to stay at South Carolina for $500K just because the culture is good. Like, the dollars mean a lot now in the portal.
I feel like it's too easy for me to say and lump it in with what I believe now is college football, which is year to year. No longer are you building 2, 3, 4 years out in advance. No longer do you land a recruit or land multiple recruits and go, all right, we're going to let them take their lumps as a freshman, but by their junior year, we've allowed these 4 or 5-star players to develop and they're playing together. You know, that used to be the mindset because that's how you built a culture. I do think there is a level of you have some form of culture in your program that everybody buys into, you know, from January to December. But I think that's it, and it's a 1-year thing and not a 3 to 4 year thing anymore.
From the close of the portal, and now it's going to go to the 16th to when it opens again, and I'm assuming it's going to be the same dates in January of next year. That's where the culture exists between the closing of the portal and it opening again at the end of the year, because everybody's locked in at that point. You can't go anywhere. Once this portal closes and everybody's committed somewhere, you're at South Carolina or whatever school you're at for the next 300 some odd days. And that's when the culture matters. And then the portal opens up and it becomes dollars and cents again.
Well, but it becomes your culture, your individual culture. I'm just going to throw a player out there. Jordan Thomas, the defensive tackle who I really like from Georgia, it becomes his culture and his mentality against yours. And what is he in it for? And it used to be where you were all in it for one common goal. But now, as the text, that's a really good question, by the way. That's a thinker. That's a thinker.
Again, we're just spitting it off the spot there, but that's something that could deserve a deep dive at some point.
But it's also something that we use, as I talked about, a narrative. When things are going really well, you're like, boy, look at the culture that's built. Like, we're saying that for Indiana, right?
Yeah.
Like Kirk Cignetti, you look at what they've done, and the easiest thing in the world is to be like, man, look at that culture he's built in 2 years to take him from 3-9 2 years ago to playing for the national championship. That's all him. Yeah, that's part of it, but if all those guys leave and this next wave of transfers he gets comes in, they don't buy in, or you're like, well, that's Kirk Cignetti's fault. He set a bad culture.
Yeah.
803-404-6100. We'll talk more about that coming up in hour number 2. But up next, PGA Tour talk. Brooks Koepka's back, one of my favorite golfers. PGA gets going this weekend. We'll talk a little bit. I'll inundate you with some information there. It is the halftime show. That's an interesting question on culture, and has me thinking more and more about college sports and developing culture and building culture because of the year-to-year now nature of the business, Tyler. And that's something I'm going to think more about, and maybe we circle back to in the coming months, maybe this summer, and trying to figure out where culture is valued in college football. Because I do think years ago it was very important.
Oh, totally. I think it held a ton of weight years ago because, again, it was about a place you're going to be spending the next 3 to 4 years of your life, and these coaches are going to be the ones that are dealing with you every single day. You want to go to a place that you feel comfortable at and you like the direction that they're going. Now, again, if you don't like where you're at, you can just go somewhere else the next year. Like that's your power as a player now.
Yeah, and another texter says culture comes through when players have to agree to lack of individual production to have a better team. But again, that's telling me your culture is a year-to-year thing, which is not. I have to look up the true definition of culture, like read it verbatim from Webster's dictionary. But
can you win with bad culture?
Yeah, and that's why I think you can. I think you can.
Look at the Eagles. Eagles are winning with bad culture.
Does anybody look at, and I know that they won the national championship. Yeah, there you go. But does anybody look at Ohio State and be like, man, look at that culture of that football program? Have you ever heard anybody look at Ohio State under Ryan Day and be like, whoa?
Not really. I think we're just like, man, that's a really talented team.
What was the culture of Florida in the late?
Yeah.
Like, what was the
culture? Very true. And, like, are we just giving Signetti the benefit of culture because they're winning?
This is the easiest thing in the world to say.
Because, like, yeah, you automatically, well, the culture must be good. It's not necessarily the case. Now, again, we don't have, Indiana players having outbursts on the sidelines, and they don't seem to be falling apart at the seams. I assume the culture is good, but maybe we retroactively assign good culture to teams when they're successful until later on the documentary comes out about them or whatever.
I mean, you think Tim Tebow and Aaron Hernandez had the same culture? You think they were living the same life?
The Swamp Kings documentary on Netflix disappointed me severely because they skipped over so many elements of what was going on with those Florida teams in the mid-2000s. I want to know what a conversation between Tim Tebow and Aaron Hernandez was like, non-football related, just about life, the way they viewed the world. I would love to know what they talked about.
I think there were dudes you threw passes to and dudes you talked to, and those could be completely separate things. 803-404-6100. Let's go to the phone lines. Casey, how you doing this afternoon? You want to weigh in on the offensive line in Lamont Paris. What's on your mind, big guy?
Not much, fellas. I hope y'all are doing well and enjoying this downtown weather.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, sir.
When it comes to culture, you have to have some semblance of expectation to create a good culture. And I think that if you can find like-minded players out of the portal that have just as high as expectation for themselves as you do, you can create a winning team without being a lovey-dovey, all-connected bros team. If you can find individual people that are willing to put it all on the line every day, 110%, they don't have to be the best team player. Because if you can get all of them together, they're going to play good. So it's definitely a year-to-year thing with college football. And I think that the longer the NIL is out, kids are going to get away from money's most important. Because there's just so many bad examples of things going wrong with transfers nowadays and money being promised that's not there. So I think that we're just still in a chaotic time of it. But it will level out to be a lot more like the NFL where you're signing 2- and 3-year contracts. And it's going to take a lot more to get out of it. I don't know when that's going to come, but I do think that's where college football is heading.
Okay.
And as far as Lamont Paris is concerned, I don't know what resources are allocated to him versus all the other programs, but part of me feels like he doesn't get the financial help he needs to the amount he needs to be competitive and the hardest conference play in almost every single sport nowadays. So, there's a lot of questions with that because I think Lamont, I've talked to him personally before. He's recruited pretty good. He's a great guy. I think he's what South Carolina needs, but I just am not sure about the resources. I want to hear what y'all say about it. But thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the phone call. I don't think he's recruited that well. I mean, it's average. It's average. It's not great. It's not awful. I can't say that it's bad when I've said multiple times that I like the freshman class he's got on campus with Walker, with Ellis. I really love Polk. I'm a big fan of Polk.
And there was a declaration about spending, right? I don't think they're not spending anything. I think they do have, I don't know how that stacks up to the rest of the SEC, but I think they have a decent amount of funds to go out there and try and acquire the talent they need. I don't think they're broke necessarily.
Yeah, we can get more into that conversation. We can circle back to it. Financially, they're not at the bottom. Financially, they're nowhere near the top. Is it enough to go and win a championship? No, not even close. Is it enough to be competitive? Yes. Is it enough to be better than the numbers that we've seen over the last 2 years? Yeah. We'll talk more about that. I'll circle back to that. Still get to that Brooks Koepka stuff on the PGA Tour and more. Hour 2 on the way. Bill Gunner from Mid-State Roofing. You hear me talk about them each and every day and how great they are, how the customer service stands out amongst everybody in that industry and how they care about you, the customer, whether it's your home or your business. And that is precisely why Mid-State Roofing has been the proven leader in the roofing and waterproofing industry for over 30 years because of the way they treat you. And that's what matters most in that industry, making sure that your operation, your home or your business, stays dry and running long into the future. And it's that long history, that proven history, that is your assurance that their professionals, when given a phone call, will provide the proper advice, the service, and the results to the needs of your facility. If you've got an issue with your roof, your home, your business, if you've got a leak, let Mid-State Roofing take a peek. 803-356-1919. Again, that's 803-356-1919. You give Mid-State Roofing a call today. It is 1 o'clock on a Tuesday. Hope you're doing well out there. Thank you for tuning in as always. And if you want to share your opinion, be a part of the program, there's no bad opinions out there. We might not agree with you. We might not agree with you, but that's the fun part of sports talk, and you don't have to agree with us. Kind of makes it more fun when you don't agree with us. Or when you think we're idiots, or Clemson fans, or any fans of any other program. It makes it more fun.
You been accused of being a Clemson fan?
Oh, yeah. Closet Clemson. I'm a closet Clemson basketball fan. I'm not even going to hide it. I'm out of the closet now.
Well,
I like Brad Briles. I have a good relationship, or had, I don't know, past tense, had a great relationship with Brad Briles. And I pull for Clemson. I don't know if pull is the right word. I don't like actively tune in.
I wouldn't consider that a closeted fan. I think that's somebody you have a personal relationship with, and you appreciate what they do as a coach.
I want to see him succeed.
Okay, maybe that leans more towards fans.
I don't want to see him beat South Carolina when they play each other, but I want to see Brad Briles succeed because I think I think the guy's a great guy.
So if they won every game but the South Carolina game, went all the way to the national championship.
Now, you also won't see me walking around town wearing orange. Orange A doesn't look good on me. I mean, quite frankly, it doesn't look good on anybody.
No,
right? There's nobody out there. None of you out there have ever put on an orange shirt and went, I look good today.
Yeah, me either. No, I hate the color orange.
No, I mean, so if sorry, Clemson fans, your school colors stink. They're bad. They're ugly. Tyler said purple's okay, but no, you got bad colors. It's awful. Garnet black's beautiful. It's mean. It's aggressive.
It's a classic color combo.
Yeah, it's a good
variations
color combo.
Variations of red and black are consistent across all sports.
You ever find somebody that put on an orange shirt and said, I look good today? They're colorblind. They don't know what they're wearing. So, no. But with that being said, that makes it fun. That's what sports are all about. That's what makes it fun. And I got to admit, Georgia, my daughter the other day, I was talking to my daughter. She's becoming a bigger and bigger Georgia fan. I told her it's perfectly fine if she goes to the University of Georgia. That's where the majority of my family went. My father, myself, my sister, actually the three out of the family went. I'm a Georgia fan. But South Carolina's home. I grew up in Lexington. I'm from the 803. This is my town, my city, my people. So if you disagree with me and you want to yell at me, if you want to disagree with that makes it more fun. And we have wandered down a path of culture that actually is a really good question. And I'm trying to wrap my brain around it and listen to your responses as to what culture means now in college football specifically, because it feels like that's the one that we use more often than not to say, like, oh, look at that program, look at that culture. And the texter was asking earlier, and I think Tyler, you tell me if I'm wrong, because I think you see it a little bit more from an outsider perspective. It is something that we use to prop up Shane Beamer in this football program at times, is like, yeah, I know they're 6-6. I know maybe they were 4-8, but man, look at the culture he's built down there and how those guys. It feels like we did that really big with Will Muschamp. Like, oh wow,
sure.
Look how they love that guy and play for him.
Yeah,
even though it didn't appear they did.
Look, it seems like all the players really like Beamer again. That they haven't given up on him, even when seasons haven't gone the way that they wanted it to. And something else too, that this always goes back to culture. And talking about the George thing, this gets brought up a lot with Kirby over there in Athens. At South Carolina, you don't have a lot of off the field issues.
True.
Right? Knock on wood, and hopefully we're not starting now. You don't have players getting arrested. You're not having to kick guys off the team. They had the situation 2 years ago with the couple of guys that came in from the 23 class, that it was in the springtime to get kicked off. I think something involving one of them having a gun on campus or something along those lines. But that's the only time I remember my 3 years doing this, there was ever off the field issues with the football team. And again, those were two or three guys that had just gotten here, and they were immediately kicked off the team.
Monty Grames, Anthony Rose.
There's one other, I think.
And yeah, I think one other. I can't remember.
Funny enough, that day was the first time I ever spoke to Coach Beamer, because Jay and Terry had him on. I was just producing this show, and Jay and Terry had him on the halftime show that day. So he calls in here. I pick up the phone, and I'd always heard, Beamer's a nice guy, personable guy. You can chat with him or whatever. And he just seemed very short with everything I asked him about. And I'm like, that's weird. And then about an hour later, that news came out. I'm like, okay, he was probably being informed of that about the time I called him. He probably thought I was calling him to tell him more bad news or something along those lines. But but besides that, there's not really been off the field problems here. Now, again, you've had guys like Juice Wells that made it seem like, okay, he's going to come back and then he leaves. That's a whole different thing. That's not necessarily a culture type of thing. But for the most part, again, knock on wood, hoping we're not going down any kind of bad path going forward here. But it seems like everything stayed pretty buttoned up here.
I think he heard you were a Clemson fan, Tyler.
Oh, is that what it
Georgia
was?
fan.
Yeah, that was it.
Georgia fan. Tyler's. You're a Georgia fan.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, for sure.
Didn't
Maybe.
want to give you any extra information.
Thought I was spying.
Yeah, you never know. Georgia's very wise about how they put people in places to gain information. I drive fast and get information. It is. It's a conversation. Look, for me, the culture is Ray Tanner and that baseball team from '98 to 2013, 2014.
It's a good one.
That's a culture. And again, you had guys coming in and they fit. I don't know, as we get into this conversation and I listen to your opinion out there and I try to build my own, I don't know where culture stands in college football anymore because of the year-to-year way of doing things. You have a program. I mean, look, and part of this goes back to the conversation we're having today about the offensive line. South Carolina's going to start at minimum 4 new offensive linemen going into into a huge season. And that's part of the conversation here is it's not how do we word this? We're going down a path. I'm not saying 6-6 next year is okay.
Right.
And I'm going to guess if I was to run a poll, 98% of you out there would say 6-6 is not okay for South Carolina football next year.
Right. I think most would agree with that.
But there's going to be that 2%. It's like, well, that's a 2-game improvement over 4-8. That shows we're taking. There's going to be 2%,
Well,
right? There's going to be.
And again, it's a tough schedule. It's like, okay, who'd you lose to? How'd you lose to them? Because if all 6 of those losses are by 1 score in the final minute against all the teams that are in the mix for the college football playoff, you can say, all right, record's still not great, but you showed fight against really good teams. That's worth something.
Well, but then there's going to be the people that text in at the end of the season like, Beamer can't coach. You know how it
Yeah,
works.
I know.
But
I'm throwing out where you could spin a positive.
I'm with you on that. So we do all this because, and we say all this, and this will be, unfortunately, if you don't like it, how the next 9 months goes, because of the importance of 2026 to the future of Shane Beamer and where he sits. If you truly believe he is on the hot seat, or if you believe that maybe the way things were structured with money and contracts for Kendall Briles and people moving forward, if you believe that he's got a little bit longer leash and that 6-6 would work next year to bring him back for what would then become year 7.
Right.
And that's to your, again, eye of the beholder, as I like to say, how you view it and what you think, and nobody's going to have the same opinion. But that's why this conversation is, because now you're looking at year 6, and this isn't unheard of, Tyler. I believe Vanderbilt, I'd have to go back and pull the numbers on Vanderbilt's offensive line, but I believe Vanderbilt just did something similar to get to 10-2 this year where they almost replaced their entire offensive line.
If not the entire thing, close to it.
It was very close to it with transfer portal players. So there's a precedent that this has worked. But you're going into a very big year 6, new offensive coordinator, new offensive line coach, and essentially a new offensive line with whether you like this, what I'm going to say or not, still a Heisman Trophy type quarterback in Lenora Sellers. Just because he had a bad 2025 doesn't erase what he was at one point in his career and the potential that he has to reach that.
Yeah, no, his ceiling has not changed, and we didn't see him hit that ceiling. And 2 years ago in 2024, he was certainly closer to it than was this past year. But no, his abilities, his athleticism is still there. And if he went out there and became that Heisman Trophy-esque quarterback that we thought he could be this past year, nobody would be surprised by it because that ability is still there. I guess going back to the offensive line, when talking about what this season's going to be, I guess, and we're not privy to know this in terms of what those exit interviews and meetings are like at the end of the year. Was there a lot of telling these guys like, hey, you should probably go find somewhere else to play, or was it like, we'd like to retain you, but you're asking for too much, and then you're having to go out there and supplement for these guys in the portal because you just weren't going to pay these guys what they worth? Again, we're not going to know that kind of stuff, but I think it's important in terms of where they viewed what they were going to have to do in the offensive line in the portal, because if you just told all these guys, you know what, we don't need you anymore, go find somewhere else to play, then you're already playing like, all right, this is going to be a massive overhaul. But if you were hoping to retain more of these guys than you did, then maybe you had to bite off a little bit more than you wanted to in the portal when it came to offensive linemen to where it's going to be more of a task than you thought it was going to be.
I think it's based, to me, I wonder about the timing of some of it. Now, I want you to remember something because there's a little confusion on this that I've read on the old internet. The transfer portal's window to enter closes on Friday.
Correct.
That doesn't. That's all it is the opportunity to enter. A player on Saturday cannot enter the portal. The portal will rage through the end of January for guys who are in it.
Well, God, they pulled Augustive out of the portal in August last year.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you can get guys anytime.
Well, if they're willing to stay in the portal now. For the University of South Carolina, I can't only speak to this because I think it was John Whittle put this out last night. It might have been Helma Granahan. There would be some obstacles to getting enrolled, just like a regular human being, a regular person trying to get into classes. There becomes obstacles to becoming enrolled in your classes to be eligible to go through spring practice.
We didn't come to play school.
Right. You don't get to just say, I'm on the team, I'll join the academic side of things coming up in August. So there are some limitations to how this works. But just because on Friday the portal closes doesn't mean that South Carolina won't continue to have visitors and host guys who are in the portal now. The problem is those guys may be sitting out a semester of college, meaning they can't enroll until May or June or July,
right?
Meaning they'll miss spring ball. Finally, meaning they get behind the 8 ball when it comes to a situation like this where you're competing for a starting spot. That's another reason it's so vital to lock up what you want with your offensive line class by the end of the week. And I know South Carolina started classes, I believe, I'm not sure when they started classes, actually. I was going to say last Thursday, but I could be wrong on that. I believe they're started.
I'm not good with school calendars anymore. Now that I've graduated, I don't keep up with that stuff
So just
anymore.
FYI on that, just because this Friday the portal closes, all it does is mean the window is closed to jump in it and go to whatever side you're looking to go to. People will still be floating around. I've seen ridiculous numbers on how many people are in the portal, Tyler.
Oh, it gets bigger every single year. And, I always make sure to remind people, just because you go in doesn't mean you come out.
Yeah.
And our guy, Jack, in the mornings, his brother played football at Marshall. He entered the portal, and nobody picked him up. Like, he effectively ended his own career by going to the portal. And again, you're taking a chance on yourself because you believe that you can pursue a better opportunity elsewhere. And again, we only really focus on the high-level guys that, are going other places and making hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars and all that kind of stuff. But there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of guys that don't get picked up, that just are ending their own careers voluntarily, basically.
803-404-6100. Going back to that expectations thing, and I don't want to kill this topic horse 1 month into a 10-month discussion on it. But like I said, if I was to put a poll out on 6 and 6, I think 98% of you, a very strong 98%, is going to be like, no, that's unacceptable. 2% are going to go, hey, it's a 2-game improvement, and we go to a bowl. Ryan weighs in and says, Beamer said we were going to the playoffs this upcoming season. Why shouldn't that be our expectations?
He said multiple times the Tuesday of the reveal show that, hey, this time next year we're going to be in that conversation. And after the Clemson game, saying this time next year both these teams, I think he said both these teams, are going to be, in position for playoff spots. So he did set that bar pretty high.
And then another texter says the same thing, 6 and 6, and Beamer's fired mid-year. Shane has set the expectations himself by coming out and saying he looks forward to the time next year and seeing where South Carolina's ranked in the playoff standings. That's on Shane. He's building the fans up, and he has to deliver just off of his words.
That is a really good point.
Remember, I just said 98%. 98% are going to text in and vote in and whatever and say, no, 6 and 6 is not acceptable. 2% is going to be like, I'm okay with that.
So it's a good point. When you set those lofty expectations and you make the statement that it's going to be different, got to live up to it. That's a good point.
Maybe we get to learn a little bit in April with the spring game. We'll tell you about that, though, because South Carolina spring game might be in doubt. We'll give you a little information on that when we come back. You're listening to the Halftime Show. 120 as we kind of banter about culture and kind of what it means to a program these days. You can continue to weigh in on that. I've got a poll question out that Tyler is tagged in off on the old Twitter machine, the X machine, asking you what is kind of the relevance of culture. Because it's interesting that the text question that came in got me thinking. It is a crutch that we lean on when things are going well, right?
It is. Is buzzword the right word?
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Because when things aren't going well, you can lean on like, oh, the culture's good though. Like, but again, they're playing for them. They haven't given up. Again, if they would have folded and gotten road graded by Clemson by 40 points, said, well, those guys gave up. They weren't trying to finish out the season because they weren't playing for anything. But that obviously didn't end up happening. And you're right, as you brought up, it's something that we've given Beamer a lot of credit for. And again, as I mentioned in the last segment, that extending to not having off the field issues for the most part, or very few in his time here. I think that goes a long way, especially when you look around college football and all the other things happening. It does for what we think culture is. I think it's very good here.
I'm under the assumption it is, but I mean, is the culture at Georgia where guys keep getting in trouble off the field great? Like, is that what we're? I think.
It's not preventing them from being successful.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Everybody everybody on Saturdays for 60 minutes are pulling in the right direction. That culture's great.
Yeah.
But when you leave the field, it seems like I don't know. I don't have an answer. I am kind of fascinated by it. Because again, at least here in Columbia, South Carolina, it feels a little, Tyler, that we're using it as a crutch at times because like is the Florida State culture? I mean, look at what they are now. Is it god awful? Is that what it is? That Florida State's problem? Is their culture just stink and now they can't win?
Great question. I don't know.
And that's why I asked, does it matter? I don't.
Now, I think we've saw those Florida State teams give up during the season. So what does that say about their culture? I don't know. Their belief in Mike Norvell, we'll see. But it depends.
And can we agree, and I don't know if y'all will agree with this, because, boy, we're going down a rabbit hole, but we're hitting that time of the year. Identity and culture are two different things.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because, like, the culture of Miami football is wild, right?
Absolutely.
Like, if you were to go by program and you were to go the culture of Miami, I'd be like, yeah, gold teeth, gold chains, loud, obnoxious, but in your face. But
that's, you're also talking about that from a standpoint of
that's who they are. That is their culture.
But is that still relevant to this specific team though? Like, I don't feel like that.
You know why?
Why?
Because they have a lunatic on the sideline whipping trash cans with jerseys on them.
That's one alumni. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's the culture of the entire team.
When I say Malachi Toney, what do you think of?
A really good wide receiver
that fits that culture. Like whether he is a great dude or not, whether he is showing up at old folks' homes after practice and playing bingo and doing all that, or whether he is acting like Michael Irvin and those guys. I don't know, and I don't care. But it's just we are ingrained with certain cultures.
I think, to your question, I think Malachi Toney fits the identity more than the culture, because I look at Malachi Toney, I'm like, oh yeah, that looks like a Miami wide receiver. That can mean a number of things depending on who you ask, but I think that's more of an identity than a culture thing.
Which one was it that ran up the Cotton Bowl, runway or whatever back in the 80s? I think it was the 80s, maybe the early 90s, and came back down shooting the six shooter and got in trouble.
Know.
Do you remember that? It's on the U. I forget his name. And he's got that great line. He's like, it's not my fault that they put the runway there. It's not my fault they scored the touchdown.
Well,
but that's
and look, for Miami back in the U days of the 80s and 90s, that was what their culture is. And I feel like we just kind of naturally associate that as still being the case. I think back to when Mark Richt took over there a decade ago, and they had the turnover chain and all that kind of stuff. It's like they were trying to rekindle that flame, but it wasn't quite the same. I wouldn't say that, like, the Richt culture or even the Cristobal culture of Miami football is the U necessarily. Like, again, there's still those small remnants. And, yeah, when you got a maniac like Michael Irvin running around the sidelines smaking trash cans after games, sure, that comes across that way. But I wouldn't say that's the culture of the team now.
803-404-6100. So let's transition. Jordan Kay yesterday, the state newspaper, putting out something that we have discussed and hinted at, the uncertainty of the South Carolina spring game. I'm under the impression that they're not going to be able to do it. And Jeremiah Donati yesterday essentially saying that priority number one is the renovations to that football stadium. And I feel like this is opening the door to South Carolina going radio silent after the portal and saying, look, fans, we'd love to have a spring game. We'll have a fan appreciation day, which would be really cool. Put something on in Gamecock Park and make it a big fan appreciation day. But we're not going to showcase Kendall Briles and that offense and formations and anything like that. We're not going to showcase the offensive line. No spring game this year, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think that probably seems like what's going to be the case here. Now, a conversation Wes and Chris and I were having a little bit earlier on. If you really want to have one, there's a way. You can figure out a way. Maybe it's not one with fans. Maybe you do it in the indoor facility and, ESPN still puts it on TV on the SEC network or something along those lines. You just don't have any fans there. Or Wes brought up, maybe go to like Benedict, right? That's a place can seat up 10, 15,000 people and you just have a smaller audience, but you still get to play a game. Like, if you really, really want to have one, there's ways to have one. It just depends on if they really, really want to have one or not.
I don't think you want to have one. I don't. 803-404-6100. Do you want to see a spring game? Just yes or no. You can just say yes or no, and I'll know what you're talking about. We'll kind of tally some votes. Do you want to see a spring game? No, I don't care. I don't feel like we're going to see anything anyway. Yes, I always love seeing younger players. Yes, I would love to see Jazavion Currents out there. Yes, I would love to see what this offensive line can do against that defensive line. I don't even know if it means anything, though. Yes, I would like to see, these running backs, Sam Dixon and Jabri Coleman.
Yep.
There are things I like to see. No, though. I don't care for a spring game this year. I feel like we would be shown nothing. And quite frankly, I think it is in the best interest of the football program to not have a spring game this year.
My answer is selfish because I like to actually physically be able to see things and talk about them. Because, again, we don't get to have access to spring practice. It's all based on insider info and all that kind of stuff. But for the spring game, I got to go out to Williams-Brice Stadium and physically see these guys have been talking about.
Right.
Again, you can't take everything away from what happens in a spring game, but I can only say, oh, yeah, so-and-so did this in the spring game, and that just gives us more things to talk about. So my reasons are selfish. That's not the reason why they aren't going to have the thing, but we'll see what they decide to do. But yes, it is definitely trending towards probably not going to happen.
7 people text in so far. 7 that I can see real quick. Billy from Blythewood is the only one that says yes. I've got no. Our luck, somebody will get hurt. No, learn nothing. KT from Lexington goes no. So 7 people just instantly yes or no. Do you care to see a spring game? And instantly it's no. And that just goes to show, 6 out of 7 right there is what? That's about 80-some-odd% of people going no, I don't care.
Yeah.
The spring game has evolved into what it is. But the bottom line on that, Tyler, I think most people are kind of like, no, you do your thing and you show us what you've got against Kent State on September 5th.
Yeah, do you think that also coincides with the fact that there's so much information out there now? We can know more about a team without actually seeing them compared to like 20 years ago where once the season ended, unless you were, subscribed to a website, which wasn't pumping out as much content as they are now, you really didn't see or hear anything about the team unless you actually went and saw the spring game or watched it on TV.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, obviously we've got 2 great websites in Gamecock Central and the Big Spur who do a phenomenal job of covering it and have essentially inside information to kind of tell us what's going on. But, and then the rest are there. You got some really good people doing stuff. But with that being said, you're right about that, about having more access and more information. We'll continue this conversation about the spring game. Keep sending it in. I see exactly what y'all are going. The overwhelming majority, by the way, going with no. 803-404-6100. We'll get into some college football playoff. Indiana, you pulling for them? Or are you going against or you going for the evil team that is Miami? We'll discuss. It is the halftime show. Bill Gunner for Mid-State Roofing. That's right, Mid-State Roofing, your leader in the roofing and waterproofing industry for over 30 years. And it's that proven history that is your assurance that their professionals will provide proper advice, the service, and the results to the needs of your facility. And they're going to do it in a manner that's both safe and pleasing to you and your operation. So have you given them a phone call and lined up a maintenance contract? If not, it's time to do it. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they're there. You'll speak with an on-call technician or a Mid-State Roofing employee. 803-356-1919. Again, that's 803-356-1919. That's how you can reach out to Mid-State Roofing today and speak with them regarding your roofing needs. Whether you're here in Columbia, Florence, Myrtle Beach, Augusta, Aiken, wherever you might be, Mid-State Roofing is there to help you. So if you've got a leak, let Mid-State Roofing take a peek. $1:35 on your Tuesday afternoon, January the 13th, where Tyler, we asked in the break about the spring game, do you even care? Because Jordan Kay putting out an article yesterday and speaking with Jeremiah Donati, athletic director, and Jeremiah Donati essentially saying, yeah, we'd like to do it, but priority goes to getting the stadium fixed and ready for September 5th. And it felt like yesterday when I read that, it backed up what you and I think I can speak for myself, I can't speak for you, what we have believed to be that there will not be a spring game this year.
Yeah, it seems to be like the case. Again, if you really, really want to have one, there are ways you can figure it out. And could you theoretically have one in the stadium without fans and you televise it? Maybe, because that's the thing, too. You know, last year in the spring, and Matt Rule at Nebraska obviously started this trend when you still had the second portal window after the spring practice period, then he was worried, hey, I don't want people looking at our spring game on TV and poaching our talent, so he canceled his spring game, and tons of other programs around the country canceled theirs. It was kind of the trend of college football last year. Beamer and South Carolina, one of the few that actually had one, though it was not televised. I do wonder if that reverses course now that we don't have the second window for people to worry about losing talent after the springtime, or if most programs are like, we didn't have one last year, we were fine, we're just not going to have one anymore going forward. I'm interested to see how programs look at that. And again, for a coach like Beamer that seems to understand the value and importance of it and wants to have one, do you find a way to make it happen? If not, maybe not at Williams-Brice Stadium.
You want to know the truly stupid thing? And I want y'all to listen to what I'm going to say. And I want you to, because in the past, this was an easy fix. What I'm about to explain was an easy fix, because a lot of you were saying the same thing. No spring game. Texter weighs in and says you don't learn anything. Fans learn nothing. Other team get to look at some of the offensive formations. No matter how little we show, shut it down. Scott says no spring game. I get it. People are weighing in. It's a overwhelming majority on no spring game.
Yeah.
Right. But I think if I asked y'all out there, do you want something for the fans? You would say, yeah. I don't know if you're allowed. I don't know if you can get away with doing a fan appreciation day like we used to, where you get posters, and this is because of NIL.
That's a good point.
And you have and you lined up. Let's say we did a great Saturday, or you did it at you did it in Gamecock Park, and you had a concert, and you have fan appreciation day, and you set it up like a small festival where you bring your. Let's be honest, it's for the kids. It is for the younger kids anyway. And you could go in, but if you had Lenore Sellers, but because of NIL, where now his signature means something and has value to it, where he's getting paid money to say go to a Firehouse Subs or go somewhere and sign a signature. Like, I don't know if these guys want to sign their signature for free.
Ooh, that's a good point.
And so because I asked this, because I do think there is an element to doing a spring fan gathering, a Saturday, that maybe doesn't involve a game, but you get the fans involved. That is a part of a culture of a football program, and tying in the fan base to the football team. And again, making it a day where, do it over maybe in the fairground. I don't know. You see hopefully I'll see where I'm going with this. You can come up with 97 million ideas, but because now Lenore Sellers is being paid, or Nick Harbor's being paid to go somewhere and sign autographs, they might be like, oh man, no.
Yeah, I'm having the vision in my head of the facility with a ton of tables set up, and each one of them has a little QR code.
Yeah.
Where you got to walk up and all right, I want Sellers autographs. It's going to be $25. Dylan Stewart, $30. And maybe you have a free table for some of the guys that wouldn't be commanding money for their autograph. Maybe backup linemen, or the long snapper or something along those lines. Maybe you have some free autographs there. But yeah, that's a good question of like, would agents, because I think a coach would say, well, it's just the team doing a team activity, and nobody's making money on this, we're just doing this for the fan base. Agents are going to say, hey, wait a minute, this is what my guy is commanding for his autograph, for an hour session at whatever these events he's been going to is. We got to work something out here, or else he's not going.
Well, I'll go to it, and as well as there's some jerk out there, or some person who's going to show up with 72 posters and circle back
Yeah.
to Lenore Sellers and get 50 posters signed, and then you're going to go on eBay and there's Lenore Sellers' signature, and that's the way it works now.
And that's why they always did the poster thing, because it was controlled, so you wouldn't have people coming up with helmets and footballs and stuff like that they're going to go sell on eBay. It's one poster that everybody gets, where it's a little bit more control. But yeah, it's different now when you talk about the NIL aspect of it. And yeah, I imagine there'd be at least one agent that would say, hey, wait a minute, bud, we're getting $30K for 1 hour autograph sessions. You're not doing anything for free.
But I do think if you're not going to do a spring game, which I'm okay with, and again, a lot of y'all are weighing in very strongly. We actually have a boots on the ground situation here. Text always in it says they're putting in a bid to paint the lights at Williams Rush Stadium next week. So good news, we're going to have new painted lights next year.
Awesome.
How about that?
Great.
But this person says there will be 0 upper deck seating available and 1/3 of the east side taken up with scaffolding. And so that kind of gives you an idea of the construction that will be going on. So
Yeah. Again, if it happens, I don't think it's going to be at Williams Rush Stadium. Again, do you really want to make this happen where you can find another way to do it? Maybe. Again, it all goes back to if you really want to make it happen.
803-404-6100. So we asked the question, who are you pulling for, Miami or Indiana? KT from Lexington says Indiana. Miami should be one of those teams that everyone should hate. You know what? In my older age, I'm becoming appreciative of the Miami Hurricane football program because they are a unifying football program.
Well, everybody can easily hate them.
We all realize we don't like. And there's an element of me that's kind of like starting to pull for them next week because I'm like, it's great for college football. Like I said yesterday, Miami Hurricanes, I want it all this week. I want all the gold teeth. I want all the gold chains. I want all the starter jackets from the 90s. I want all the Michael Irvin I can get because that's Miami football. And because if you're not a Canes fan, like there's no gray area. You don't go, I kind of like them.
Yeah.
I feel like Miami's one of those organizations, college programs, whatever you want to, departments. There's no middle ground. You're like, I hate those guys, despise them, or you're like, man, I'm all about the U.
It's a polarizing program.
And I love it.
Yeah, and
great to have them in the championship game.
Sure, and I think I'm interested to see what the ratings are because, you don't have your Alabamas or Ohio States or whatever, but, like, I think there's a lot of casual fans say, oh, the U in the national championship, let me check that out. Like, I think, and that with the intrigue of what Indiana's done this year, I think you're probably going to get a pretty good rating for this game.
I do, and Texterways, and yeah, I'm conflicted too, Texter. Bill says he's liking what Miami is doing, by the way, but the way he talks, it sounds like he hates them. Yeah, you've hit the nail.
You enjoy hating them.
I do it. They make football great again. The game, not the off the field stuff, but they make football because, I mean, it's not that I don't like Ohio State, but last year's national championship game was so cardboard and so just like, I don't dislike Notre Dame. I don't like them. I don't dislike Ohio State. I don't like them. But it was just, it was just vanilla to me. This game, it feels like it features currently the good of Indiana, all that's right, even though they spent a ton of money in the portal and recruited a bunch of older players, and we'll get to that in the next coming up, against all that's bad with football in Miami.
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from with that. Personally, I'm rooting for Indiana because I just want to see them finish this thing off and be one of the most insane stories I've ever seen in college football history. I mean, I don't have anything against
I'm
Miami.
getting on the bandwagon early. I'm anti-Indiana.
Okay. But because you love to hate Miami so much, you want to see them win. Am I right on that?
That's right, yeah.
All right.
It's
Make
like
sure
the
I got it
girl
right.
that ignores you, that talks bad about you.
Sure.
That like puts you down that can't remember your name. And because she's so mean to you,
that makes her more attractive.
It makes her more attractive. I think it's a fatal flaw in my character and who I am as a single person, that the angry, mean girl is the attractive one to me out there. Like, if you're mean to me and you're attractive, I'm like, oh, I can't get away from it. I need more of it.
Because it becomes more of a pursuit because it's more of a challenge.
Yeah, I think you're right in that. And Miami is the mean, obnoxious, takes me out, makes me pay for the overly expensive meal.
Forgets your name.
Is texting 3 other guys while
on the date with you. By the way, one of those guys picks her up from the date.
yeah. Not riding home with me. I don't know. I'm conflicted. Life is conflicting right now. 803-404-61. We'll come back. NASCAR. You were pretty excited about this.
Very excited.
We're going to tell you all about it. It's the halftime show. Keep the takes coming back in. We'll get some more of them in hour number 3. Chuck says if there's a highly recruited player here locally, play the spring game at a high school stadium. I think you could do so much. I don't think you need to have it at all, recruiting or fan-wise. I do think it would be really cool to do something in the month of April for fans, but I don't think, Tyler, that a spring game, and I quite frankly, if South Carolina ever wanted to walk away from a spring game, this would be the time to do it.
Well, and that's what I said last year when the trend was kind of going in that direction. Beamer was adamant about wanting to have one last year, which they did. I said, with stadium construction coming up in 2026, you have a built-in excuse to not have one then, and I thought maybe it wouldn't return after that if the trend continued across college football. Of course, with the portal window moving now, I don't know what that's going to be like across college football for this year at least. Yeah, I'm towards the it's probably not going to happen type thing.
Speaking of pleasing the fans, now let me tell you, as we know, I'm kind of still new to the whole NASCAR thing, and I was a 2-time Corley Pool Solutions Checkered Flag Challenge winner.
Mm-hmm.
Reggie Anderson, the great in that thing. Nobody else in our little pick'em could ever win. Nobody knows what
kids
they're doing.
pick it for him.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. I'm being beat by a bunch of kids every year by Reggie Anderson. Nobody else, though, has any clue what they're doing in that thing. Carrie Tharp won 1 year. But I know that they would be complaining about the playoffs, if you will.
Yes.
Yesterday, NASCAR comes out, and you're very excited about the new playoff format that you think has been simplified and will make getting to a champion much easier.
Yeah, well, it's really kind of a return to what it used to be. So they had the chase from 2004 to 2013 before they went into the elimination-style playoff format. And that format, very complicated. It was done to create drama and, as they used to call it, Game 7 moments. And what it did is delegitimized the championship overall. Fans didn't respect the champion. Drivers seemed disincentivized, to pursue the championship compared to what they did in years past. And I think returning to the chase format for next year and beyond, it kind of reinvigorates what it means to be the champion of the sport, which I think is very important. And look, NASCAR in this offseason with the lawsuit and all that kind of stuff has to mend a lot of fences with its fan base because a lot of bad PR has gone on over the past couple months, and I think this is a big step in the right direction.
I've gotten into it, man, and we're going to figure out something here on this program to do with a pick'em and what we're going to do and how we're going to incorporate that because the one thing about it, kind of like Premier League soccer, is I got into it for a different because I got into Premier League soccer because my son was playing it, and then it was on in the morning, and NASCAR has become a large part of my life on Sunday afternoons. And, thank you to Jen for getting me heavily involved in that and Carrie Tharp and Josh Harris and everybody. And, I look forward to this coming season. They'll get started 4 weeks from Sunday down in Daytona. But you mentioned it, the Clash at Bowman Gray is 2 weeks away from this coming Sunday. Anything that anybody you're ready to take a stance on early now that you now know the new championship format and everything?
Yeah, and people have gone back and said, okay, if this format was applied to the past handful of years, you're looking at the Kyle Larsons, Denny Hamlins, Joey Logano's, William Byron's, those kind of being the guys that would win this kind of format. Because it's going to take – because the thing about the playoff elimination format is you could get lucky. Right? You could have a win at the right time. You could have other guys get eliminated to where, again, the champions weren't as legitimate as they needed to be. You're going to have to put together a full season, to qualify for the playoffs, we're calling it the chase now, to get into the top 16, be seeded well enough in the top 16 because the seeding depends on how many points you start the chase with, and then go through the 10-race stretch in the season performing at a high level. So it's going to benefit guys that drive for the bigger teams, that have more experience. Like, it's going to be very hard to win the championship, and I think you're only going to see a handful of guys win it over the next handful of years with this format returning, but that builds star power because you have guys that can have their own mini dynasties of winning multiple championships, winning a lot of races and all that kind of stuff, and I think that stuff is really good for the sport itself.
It'll be interesting. Darlington's moved way up this year. Earliest I can remember it, March 22nd, so that'll actually be, I believe, the first weekend of the NCAA basketball tournament weekend.
I believe so.
When the race at Darlington will be run, the very first one, the playoff race, the second one will hold steady. It'll be the first playoff race of 2026. Yes. On Labor Day weekend, Sunday, September the 6th. So that one not changing. But for those of you who are Darlington fans and love to get down there and check it out, March 22nd coming up for that. And I'm excited. Again, we'll figure out something to get into some NASCAR because NASCAR is a part of the South, and I got to admit, I've become a little bit more of a fan.
Yeah.
Through the last few years.
Well, you're Denny Hamlin's #1 fan.
I am. I listen, big Denny Hamlin. Tough. I think tough off season for him. Is it? I guess. We'll see.
A lot of tough things happen to him.
803-404-6100. How you can weigh in. And Chris weighs in and said maybe not this year, but how about a Sportsorama type spring game like the high schools do? Go to Atlanta. Go to Charlotte.
Got to get other teams to sign off on it.
Yeah,
I like where your head's at.
Maybe do an all-day thing. I don't know. That's a good question. Another texter weighed in just on the Indiana thing and said the average age of Indiana Hoosiers is 23 years old. For perspective, the Packers' average age this season was 25. Does that matter?
I think it does.
Okay. We'll get more into that, get into a little bit of basketball, get into a little bit more back from the offensive line. You're listening to the Halftime Show. It is 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, January the 13th. Tyler Head, Captain Dave Adair, and Bill Gunner as we pilot you through here the final hour before turning it over to Jay and Terry here coming up after us. But we have been discussing a lot of different things today, and we'll get back into the offensive line discussion. South Carolina, Tyler, loses another offensive lineman, Ryan Brubaker, to the transfer portal. And look, limited snaps, injured throughout his career, maybe a lot of upside, maybe a lot of potential. We'll never know. Hopefully he goes on. He represented the game. I think this is one thing you have to take into account with the portal. He represented the university as best he could.
Sure.
Didn't ever hear about him in trouble. Unfortunate for the young man. He was highly thought of, but injuries slowed his career. Hopefully he goes back somewhere, maybe to a smaller school, and has, I don't even know what his eligibility situation is because of injuries. I guess you can't apply for a medical red shirt until after your senior year.
Yeah, so if anything, he has 1 to 2 years left.
Yeah.
Again, he's too far along to have been a COVID year guy, which now means that you only have 5 guys returning from last year's offensive line room: Damola Judahan, Blake Franks, Shed Surratt, Marquis Anderson, and Nolan Hay. That's
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Everybody else is new. And again, you've got 9 total guys that have come in either from the portal or the high school ranks.
So brand new. It's essentially going to be a brand new. Now, you said there's 5 guys. Give me a goes of Marquis Anderson. And Shed Surratt are going to, I think, be the initial guys that you look at that could step in and start. I'm not as high on Nolan Hay as you are. You would throw Nolan Hay into that.
I threw that out there because he did actually start a game. I would imagine maybe.
And by the way, we should say this is at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. There's still a few days left for people to enter the portal.
And again, I'm just going off what we have as of right now. But again, Nolan Hay did start at least one game for you a season ago. Again, Damola Judahan, who was a freshman a season ago and played a couple snaps and some garbage time stuff, and then Blake Franks, and that's it.
Okay, so that's where things stand as of today. We've been talking about it, and it brought up a question about culture because we have bragged. I feel like we've bragged on the culture for Shane Beamer, regardless of record, over the last 5 years. And just because guys are leaving doesn't mean the culture is bad, obviously. There can be a lot of factors into it nowadays. But, I think it was a legit question of, well, you got a lot of guys leaving. Like, this isn't, we lost 3 or 4. You've lost basically 4 out of your starting 5. You've lost some reserves and shivers now that you thought would be maybe competing for a starting spot, depending on how Randy Clement saw it working out. It's going to be a completely new offensive line. You're going to have to buy a program going into the season to look down there and see what number is whom and who committed that holding or false start.
And, like this past offseason, I think it went through a lot of the offseason with a pretty good idea of what the offensive line was going to be based on, reports out of practice and stuff like that. Again, and credit to Beamer and company for the guys they got. All these guys are versatile. Most all of them can play interior or tackle, so there's no telling who could be starting at what spot. Again, Peak, the guy from NC State, the leading candidate to be your left tackle replacing Josiah Thompson. But all the other spots, and again, we think Shed Surratt's going to have a shot at one of these spots as well as one of the returners. Who knows? There could be 20 different offensive line combinations we talk about by the time the season gets here.
So we'll continue to monitor that. We'll talk more about it. But coming up in the next segment, Tyler's got some numbers on the offensive line, which I think is another very interesting part of this because a lot of the discussion has been like, well, those guys that are leaving didn't fit the system. They didn't work with what Kendall Briles and Randy Clement wants. But you've got numbers that kind of back up the fact that the guys coming in don't also really fit the Kendall Briles system.
And again, it's just
if that's what we're going with.
Yeah, and it's just one specific metric, and that's not saying the guys that don't have the numbers that you would want to see aren't going to come in here and be able to be successful. But offensive line, again, is one of those spots. When we look at wide receivers, I can go and look at all these statistics for Nitro Tuggle. I can look at some of these other guys' skill position spots to get an idea of what they are. Offensive line is a little bit different because it's more of a nuanced position where you're having to look at Pro Football Focus grades and pressures allowed and that kind of stuff. So you don't have as much at your disposal in terms of figuring out what these guys are before they play here.
803-404-6100. So we'll get more into that coming up. Real quick, this kind of coming out in the last 2 hours. This is from David Ubben, if I'm saying that correctly, with The Athletic. And he says that FBS head coaches have voted unanimously to expand the redshirt years from the redshirt year, or years, depending on how you want to look at it, from 4 games to 9.
Yes.
So this is just a recommendation that will be put forth to the Division I committees. This would essentially, Tyler, I think, move more toward maybe a compromise of you get all 5 years of your eligibility to do what you want. For again, what it would be is, right now, obviously, if a player plays in more than 4 games, he can start 4 games. But if a player plays in more than 4 games, they lose their red shirt. This would open it to now playing in 9 games before you would lose your red shirt.
At that point, why don't you just do the whole season? I mean, what's the difference? Because, and it's worth noting, postseason games don't count towards that. So, like, you can play 4 games in the regular season, play a bowl game, you can still preserve your red shirt. Like, if you're going to expand it to 9, why not just do the whole thing? Why? This is the closest to, like, doing the 5-and-5 that I feel like we're going to get. Like, why not just go ahead and say, all right, you got 5 years of eligibility, and you have 5 years to use it. You don't get a redshirt year. You're in college football for 5 years, and that's it.
Right.
Now, maybe you can make an exception for extreme injuries or whatever, but that's where a lot of coaches seem to want to go, and this kind of seems like a step in that direction.
Kind of a compromise, if you will, to what's taking place, and that would make sense. So something we'll continue to monitor there with the NCAA and FBS coaches who had voted unanimously, is what it says, by the way. So that's what, 134-0.
136, actually.
136.
Yeah,
all right.
We got Missouri State and Delaware join this year.
Okay, so 136-0 there on that vote, and something we'll continue to watch. Also, we have talked a little bit about the NFL game last night. Wild card weekend comes to a wrap, and I think it was a shocker. And it was a shocker not that the Texans won, that the Texans came in and just bludgeoned the Steelers in the manner that they did, and now attention turns to the Steelers, I think. All right, what's happening with Mike Tomlin? What's happening with Aaron Rodgers? And look, say what you want about Aaron Rodgers. If that was it, I feel like that's a shame for the way for him to go out. But I also feel like it's time for him to leave.
Yeah, and look, not everybody can be Peyton Manning and go out on top by winning the Super Bowl. And even then, Peyton Manning had a very bad final year. He got benched for Brock Osweiler. People forget about that. He couldn't throw the ball to save his life. That defense was just so good. They're like, all right, if you can manage to get us like 14 points, we'll take care of the rest. And obviously won the Super Bowl and beating the Panthers. But, Aaron Rodgers, and I will say this year was fine. Nobody was accusing him of being...
Better than I thought it would be.
Yeah, nobody was accusing him of being an MVP candidate by any means, but he was a perfectly serviceable quarterback, and I thought, I said this last week, what you saw out of him at the end of that game against the Ravens, like, man, he still does have a little tinge of that magic that he used to have. Not the same level, but he can still pull it out when he needs to. And obviously last night was a different story. I could see him sticking around for another year or so. Again, he's just turned 42. His health has been good the past 2 years. Some team will pay him. I don't know if it's a Super Bowl contender, but can't tell me the Browns wouldn't throw money at him to be. Well, they probably don't have money to throw at him because of their quarterback situation. But like, if he wants to play, he can play.
Mike McDowell. Why am I blanking on the Dolphins' former coach?
McDaniel.
Thank you. I was going to get to it sooner or later. Rumored to be interviewing for the Browns job coming up here very soon. You just look at the NFL and who would take a chance on him. And I think the big part here would be a team who's right there on the verge of the playoffs, but needs a quarterback to push them over the top. The Dolphins. I could kind of see that scenario where the Dolphins are that team.
And we have breaking news.
Oh, go ahead with it. There we go. See, yep. I forewarned, I foreshadowed back in, I believe, the noon hour that this could be coming, and we had to stay attention.
So this is per ESPN. We're quite literally watching on SportsCenter right now. Mike Tomlin stepping down from the Steelers head coaching position. Not fired, but stepping down after 19 seasons.
Not retired either.
Not retiring either, just stepping down.
So ESPN coming up with that, as Tyler just says, Mike Tomlin stepping away. We'll see if he takes kind of a Kyle Whittingham approach of it's time for a new scenery.
His phone's going to be ringing off the hooks, just like John Harbaugh's.
Yeah.
Like, the scenery got old in Pittsburgh. This wasn't working anymore, but you can't tell me the Browns, the Giants, the Titans, the Falcons, all these teams aren't going to be saying, hey, we'll take you, man. We would love to get sick of just winning 9 to 10 games a year.
We'll come back. We will get into, there was some coaching moves yesterday with South Carolina. We'll tell you about that, and we'll get back into Tyler's got some numbers on the offensive line. are these guys coming in? How do they fit in the supposed system of Kendall Briles and Randy Clements? Remember, a lot of people are saying, well, those guys that left don't fit. These guys fit the system. Well, Tyler has some numbers that might actually go opposite of that. We'll explain when we return. You're listening to the Halftime Show.
Tyler Head here for our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialist. Rain's never too far away. And if you have an open crawl space in your home and experience a storm, you might end up with some standing water underneath there, and that can create a litany of problems in your home. It can invite things like mold and mildew and pests like termites in your home as well, which you absolutely do not want. Did you also know that about half the air that you breathe in your home comes from your crawl space? And the last thing you want to do is be breathing in nasty, moldy, mildew, termite-infested air. That's our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist come in. Go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanmix.com. They'll send a professional out to your home to evaluate your foundation and crawl space issues and get them fixed so you and your family can live worry-free going forward. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantycanmix.com. Let our friends at Canty Foundation Specialist help you out.
2:15 on a Tuesday. 2:15 Tuesday here at 107.5 The Game. Hope you're doing well out there as we kind of carry you through and get you set. Back half of the week will be pretty busy. Tomorrow night, reminder, South Carolina men's basketball, late tip. Going to have to get a nap in.
Not a fan.
8:30 pregame right here at 107.5 The Game with Casey and Derek. Gamecocks will travel to Fayetteville, Arkansas to take on the Razorbacks. Razorbacks coming off getting walloped by Auburn over the weekend. John Calipari's team, though, pretty strong. Pretty strong. Going to be quite the test. I have not seen a spread out for that game just yet, but that'll be tomorrow night, and then we'll have the game for you at 9 o'clock Eastern time right here at 107.5 The Game in Columbia. 100.3 The Game in Myrtle Beach. On Thursday night, we'll have Carolina calls with Lamont Paris. But the big thing Thursday night, Tyler, will be that of the number 2 versus number 4 showdown over at Colonial Life Arena when number 4 Texas comes rolling into town, led by Vic Schaefer, who thinks the SEC is out to get him.
Yes, Texas, who everybody at the conference office detests.
Yes.
And has done no favors for since they've come into the conference. Yes, but specifically having to go back-to-back to LSU, which we're watching them lose that game on Sunday here on the replay on SEC Network, and then having to come to Colonial Life Arena. They are specifically trying to make life difficult for Vic Schaefer. Don't tell him, by the way, starting on February the 1st, they have 5 ranked teams in 15 days. He's going to blow a gasket.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that, we'll get more into that tomorrow with what Vic Schaefer had to say. Poor little old Texas being mistreated by the big, mean, ugly SEC.
Yeah, we talked about girls you go on a date with. Texas is the high-maintenance girl.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of Amazon purchases there.
Yeah, the water at the restaurant's not up to her standard.
Don't leave your card in her buggy there, because if you do, you'll rack up a lot of charges for stuff that you didn't intend to buy or pay for. But we'll talk more about that, Texas, and the Gamecocks. That'll be 7 o'clock over at Colonial Life Arena, and you'll hear that actually on B106.7 coming up on Thursday. Reminder, Saturday, the basketball game against Auburn will be on the road, and that'll be a 6 o'clock tip, so we'll have 5:30 pregame for you as it pertains to that. 803-404-6100 if you want to text in this afternoon on anything we've been talking about, a lot about the offensive line and what's going to take place. So with all that being said, how do these players fit into the Kendall Briles system? What exactly does the Kendall Briles system entail? Well, good news. We have audio. He spoke about it. And you said this is from years ago?
So this was, I want to say, early 2024, still at TCU. It was one of those coaching, like the AFC-CA thing we talked about a moment ago, one of those like coaching clinic type things where he got up and spoke about his offensive philosophy as a whole. I specifically just pulled when he was talking about tempo and offensive line.
Here is these comments. Listen closely. This is Kendall Briles giving us an eye into his tempo and what he likes his offensive line to be able to do.
We play with one ball. That's what we want to do. So when we start a drive, we're going to try to play with one football, okay? And we'll talk about it, but you got to involve your managers on that as well. But when we start the drive, we need to play with one football. Obviously, there's going to be stoppage. There's going to be things that happen defensively. They're going to flop on you, okay? That's going to happen. There's going to be penalties, all that type of stuff. And you can exchange the ball, and then if it's a weather situation, you can play with a different ball. But we want to try to play with one football when we start a drive. Skilled players get the ball to the center judge. You guys know that. Center take the lead. It's imperative that your center is an intelligent guy that understands the tempo and knows how to go find where the ball is going. If it's out of bounds to the left, get to the left hash. You know where it's going to be. Find the line judge, get set, so those other guys can get set off of you. Nobody else is going to get down. The right guard ain't going to get his big ass down until you get your hand on the ball, and then the left tackle is going to, all that's going to happen after you get down, okay? So he's got to be fast, being able to get down.
So re-listening to that a second time, a lot of fascinating stuff there. Number one, I get after you explained it a little bit, I get the one ball concept now of that's the tempo.
Yep.
And one of the things that does that has become so big in college football is prevent the opposition from substituting.
Yes.
You can get them into their formation and their alignment and hopefully keep them there with the personnel they've got on the field, and you hope to get a mismatch in that situation, which has led to the great injury, the fake injury debate of the last 2 years.
Listen, you thought what happened last year was aggravating with like Ole Miss and stuff like that. It's going to get a whole lot worse. You're going to have a lot of teams that are going to suddenly have cramps or guys dropping
Well, you got to be kind of more savvy about it now.
Now the rule is if the ball is set. Like once they get the ball set for play, so you just do it before they set the ball for play. So yeah, they're gonna have to be quicker because again, you get up on the ball and try and get that next snap going. But I imagine there'll be a designated, interior defensive lineman that suddenly just can't get up after a play that you got 30 yards on or something like that.
Hammy having a hard time.
Yeah.
So you've got numbers though. So again, the big concept has been, well, here we go. These guys, those offensive linemen, Josiah Thompson, Tree Babalade, Travon Ball, Case and Henry, they didn't fit. They didn't fit what Kendall Briles wants to do. And I will say, if you listen to Kendall Briles in that situation, you're kind of like, all right, I see where you're going with this.
Sure.
This is not built for everybody. However, there's a concept that, well, they're getting their guys in. They're getting the up-tempo offensive linemen in. You have numbers that you can't really say support that.
Yeah, and look, this is just one specific metric. There's a lot of specifics to playing the offensive line that I'm sure Randy Clements could sit in here and school us on for the next 3 hours as to why, these numbers aren't an end-all be-all. But I was curious as they were getting guys in the portal, knowing this was going to be a different type of up-tempo offense, what exactly these guys' experience is with running offenses that are very fast. And for reference, TCU this past year, with Kendall Briles, the offensive coordinator, was 35th in the nation, or 32nd in the nation, in overall tempo. They were snapping the ball an average of every 24.6 seconds. So when I look at these other guys that came in the portal, the one that fits it the best, who's been the most up-tempo offense, is Emmanuel Poku, coming over from East Carolina, and John David Baker, who was also in the mix for the South Carolina offensive coordinator job, had them as the fourth most high up-tempo offense the past 2 seasons, so 4th and 25 and 4th and 24 as well. So Poku very well-versed when it comes to a speedy offense. Hank Purvis at Purdue this past year, 35th overall, so right there kind of in line with what TCU was doing. Everybody else, though, pretty far off. Carter Miller, he's been at 3 different schools. UCF was 80th. UL Monroe was 130th 2 seasons ago, and James Madison was 91st. Jacarius Peak, who again is the #1 offensive tackle out of the portal at NC State in his 3 seasons, 85th, 129th, and 110th. Again, the 2 guys coming from the lower ranks, Dane Arnett from Ferris State, couldn't find specific numbers. They did run about 4 fewer plays per game than TCU, and Seth Smith from Northern Arizona ran about 3 fewer plays than TCU did. Again, we don't have the seconds per play numbers for those kind of levels. That's all I could go off of. And again, it's just one metric, but I was just curious on what these guys' experiences are, because everybody runs tempo, right? Even at Carolina, we saw tempo get mixed in there, but this is an offense under Kendall Briles that's going to sustain it throughout the entire game, so that will be different for these guys that haven't been in those types of offenses before.
And let's go back specifically. I asked you this earlier. Carter Miller, who right now I think we are all under the impression maybe the lead guy for center, although I think Marquis Anderson could have something to say about that. Maybe somebody else. Darius Gray, the highly thought of 5-star freshman, is a guy that they've said potentially could play center. He really is, much like you've pointed out, is versatile. They can play any spot on the line. But the Carter Miller numbers there, when you hear Kendall Briles talk specifically about getting your hand on the ball and then everybody lining up after you've started, because that center has got to be in shape, his numbers really didn't specifically fit being a product of this system.
Yeah, all of his offenses, again, 80th, 130th, 91st, all been on the slower side of things. And again, if he is going to be, your starter at the center spot, then it is up to him to get on the ball as soon as it's spotted, get set, and get things going. Because as he mentioned there, the right guard and the tackles aren't going to get down unless the center's ready to go.
803-404-6100 is how you can weigh in on that. So it's going to beg the question, like, how quickly, because you essentially, we talk about, some of y'all are weighing in, we were talking about our spring game discussion, and for some reason, I don't feel like people get it completely, Tyler, because they're like, well, let's just go scrimmage South Carolina State or Coastal, well, they haven't approved that just yet.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. We were talking about it earlier. I don't think there's a rule against it, but I know because Colorado and Syracuse tried to do that thing in the spring last year, and the NCAA said no. Now, again, if you did it, what's the NCAA going to do? I don't know. Maybe they take some recruiting hours away or whatever, but they lose power by the day. So I don't know how afraid we are of the NCAA.
Well, the reason I say that, all right, you don't have a spring game, but at least now, as we are led to believe, we assume Kent State and Towson are not formidable competition, as we are led to believe. You get 8 quarters that are essentially scrimmage quarters. to get this thing worked out with that offensive line. And listen, some of it is, Tyler, they got to come out and be stronger. That offensive line I've seen in the past, it doesn't matter if your scheme worked or whatever. They couldn't just simply shove people back off the football.
Yeah, and again, when you have much like a couple years ago when they went 5-7, Coach Beamer reevaluated everything all the way down to strength and conditioning and how they were doing, their offseason workouts. And maybe you're doing that again because, everybody looked the part, right? I mean, Josiah Thompson, if you've seen him in person, dude's a monster. But when he's out there on the line, he's getting pushed around like a marshmallow. You know what I mean? So how do you get the most out of those guys from a strength standpoint and an aggression standpoint? That's something else, too. Like, all these dudes on the offensive line seem like perfectly nice guys, right? Like Boaz Stanley seemed like a very polite dude when I heard him talk in the media, but there's no nastiness on the field. They couldn't flip that switch. Can Randy Clements make them do that? I don't know, but I like nastiness on the offensive line, and I didn't see that this past year.
Coming back, one thing that's happening, and it goes back to your numbers, and we'll stay on this for a minute, is you did speak in there is experience with your numbers. There's a lot of experience on this offensive line and the number of snaps that certain guys have played. And we'll let you listen to Josh Pate talk about the value of experienced portal players against young, high-end recruits. And I'll also filter that out to taking players in the transfer portal who maybe don't have as much experience and why I like those guys. And we'll let you listen to a little bit of audio and debate that because, Tyler, one thing you just mentioned, these offensive linemen they're bringing in, a lot of them have played a lot of football.
Yes.
Very experienced football. We'll talk about that. You're listening to Tyler Head, Captain David Ayer, and Bill Gunner. It is the Halftime Show. Just about a little over 20 minutes left in our program, and then we will kick you on over to Terry and Jay this afternoon, but we'll make the most of the last 23 minutes here. Again, the breaking news nationally, Mike Tomlin stepping down. Now, keyword stepping down, not retiring, not fired.
Right.
Mike Tomlin stepping away, and as I feel like I'm learning in just about everything, there's an expiration date for anything and everything. And I say this because I had this conversation off air with a lot of people. It feels like Dabo Swinney's expiration date with Clemson is coming. That doesn't mean he's done with coaching football, but it just...
It's getting very contentious.
Yes. You see what I'm saying on that?
And again...
Kyle Whittingham's expiration date hit with Utah.
Mike Gundy's with Oklahoma State earlier on this year. Now, they were in a lot worse of a situation. They were really bad, and they fired him. It wasn't stepping away. But, yeah, it comes to a point where no matter how long you've been there, no matter what you've done, if you're not performing at the highest level, then it's like, okay, well, what's the point, right? Like this, there's nothing about the Steelers and Mike Tomlin that makes me think, well, you know what, 26, they're going to be a Super Bowl contender, and, 27, 28, 29, all those years, they're going to be right back in the mix for making an AFC championship. It just kind of had run its course. Like, look, he had a really good quarterback for a really long time, Ben Roethlisberger, had tons of great defensive talent, tons of elite players at the skill positions, and they capitalized on that by winning a Super Bowl, going to another Super Bowl, continuously being in the mix for the AFC Championship. But since their last appearance a decade ago, they hadn't been anywhere close. They've lost every single first-round game that they've played. And again, through different quarterbacks and different coordinators and all this kind of, it just wasn't working anymore. Now, again, that doesn't mean Mike Tomlin can't go to another team and be successful. And much like John Harbaugh, his phone's going to be ringing off the hook, and he can either go take another coaching job or he can go sit for a while. He can go do TV. He can do whatever he wants. If he wants to coach, he can coach. If he wants to do something else, he can do something else. But he'll be sought after, and he can restart fresh somewhere else, just like whoever they bring in can give a new perspective on where the Steelers are at.
We'll see. I mean, look at all the job openings that are available. And I know this texter comes in from Marshall, and I know Preston is on top of this because of his wife. But Preston said apparently this morning Tomlin's daughter is on the University of Georgia gymnastics team.
She is a gym dog. That's correct.
Well, it just so happens there's an NFL job opening in the state of Georgia.
It's about a little over an hour down the road. If you get on 316 and go east, you can be in Athens pretty quick. I made that drive many times.
Just a thought. 803-404-6100, but that's the kind of the national news of the day. Now, we've been talking about the offensive line. Chris weighs in and asks a question. It says, is there any proof of concept with a football team replacing their entire offensive line in one season, which led to a successful season? I can't find any on any level of football. Well, yeah, there actually is. Now, mind you, we're in a brand new world, right? We're Aladdin and we're on the carpet, a whole new world.
Good pull.
Thank you. Been holding on to that one. You don't have the transfer. We haven't had the transfer portal like we do to pull something off like this. So this is still brand new. Colorado, though, 2 years ago, the Shador Sanders, Travis Hunter final year, did something very similar. Now, a successful season, eye of the beholder. 8-4 was successful. I can't remember what exactly Colorado was 2 years ago. They went to the
Texas.
Was it the Texas or the Alamo?
I think it was the Alamo Bowl.
Okay,
right.
Yeah.
Alamo Bowl.
They went there, and then they got their doors blown off by somebody. I can't remember whom in a game that there was rumors that Colorado had a much more fun time than they should have leading up to the bowl game. But that was a successful season. And then Tyler, we don't have the exact numbers on it, but Vanderbilt did something very, very similar to what South Carolina did, and Vanderbilt did it this past year, which led to a 10-2 year.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the Vanderbilt roster right now to confirm this. Okay, got two. It does look like they rebuilt their entire offensive line.
Yeah, they did. I know that.
In the portal from guys coming from elsewhere. I believe, so Chase Mitchell, one of their right guard, he played right guard when they came here. He was left guard some too this season. I think he was the only one that wasn't a transfer.
That's what I thought.
Started on their offensive line. So 4 or 5.
So yeah, there is. I mean, again, successful season, but yeah, Vanderbilt did something very similar last year. Now, one thing that you have to do when you do this, Tyler, is go out and get experienced ball players, guys who have played a lot of snaps. And the one thing South Carolina has done here is gone out and land linemen that have played a lot of snaps during their career. And this is Josh Pate. Now, this is a very good breakdown from Josh Pate of talking about the value of experienced portal players. Now, he's doing it against high-end high school recruits.
Right, so like 4 and 5 stars, blue chip guys.
But I think you can also weigh that against going out and getting guys who, and listen, if you want a precedent here, this is something very similar to what Lamont Paris did in landing B.J. Mack and Talon Cooper and some of those guys who were experienced college basketball players, which led to his best season. Adding experience and what I'll call is a lot of snaps on the offensive line may be important. Here's Josh Pate talking about the value of experienced portal players against high-end recruits coming out of high school.
It's one thing for those rankings committees to sit around and rank guys, and then they go on to become what they become. Number one, all right, Cole Kublik comes out of high school. He's ranked a 3-star offensive tackle. He commits to UAB. 5 years later, after a redshirt year and 3 or 4 years of playing, he transfers to, let's say, Auburn for his senior year. He's going to be classified as a former 3-star. You are 5 years, you're half a decade removed, half a decade of physical and mental maturation removed from what your high school rating was, and yet you're still going to be considered a 3-star. I understand when you go in the portal, you get re-ranked and all that stuff, but for broad strokes purposes, people are going to remember you as a former 3-star.
Yeah.
You are going to then go to Auburn, and you're going to face off against probably a 5-star true freshman edge rusher that Alabama got on campus. That will be looked at as 5-star versus 3-star. And in that matchup, a fan will say, boy, Alabama's got the talent edge in that matchup. My point is, talent matters a whole lot. I also think a lot of people who blanketly throw around talent designations and talent labels and who's more talented, they have no clue what they're talking about. And that's before we even broach the difference between having a lot of talent and having a good team.
So this really, I feel like, for me, started to take precedent in college basketball.
Okay.
Because you had the one-and-dones, right?
Right.
So you would see the Dukes, the Kentuckys, the Kansas, the big-name programs who were doing the one-and-dones. And they would get to the NCAA tournament, and they might run into a team who had guys that had been around 3, 4, 5 years.
Well, a lot of those smaller schools pull the upset. Like, oh, that's a team full of juniors and seniors.
And nobody would be like, well, they were more talented than Duke. They'd been around. They had experienced players that were accustomed to being there. And that is now you can transfer that property over to college football with teams who maybe have gone out and gotten in. Vanderbilt is of this mantra. Indiana, this is Indiana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, Indiana didn't go out and kill it in the portal. Now, they spent money wisely, and they had a lot of money to spend. And if you don't think Indiana and the influx of money from Mark Cuban played a role in where they're at, then you're sticking your head in the sand and you're yelling la la la.
Right.
No, money helped, but they also went out and spent it wisely on experienced players. That's why somebody hit us up earlier and said Indiana's average age on that football team is 23. They're an older veteran group. They've played a lot of snaps. We're seeing South Carolina do that on their offensive line right now.
Yeah, again, you look at a lot of the Indiana roster, like 25 or 30 of those guys came with Kurt Signetti from James Madison. Like, these guys were FCS level players a couple years ago, but they've played so much football. And yes, they've also got talent from elsewhere. Fernando Mendoza came from Cal, who had a really good year last year, and among other guys. So it wasn't just that, but yeah, when you kind of look at the grand scheme of things, not saying that high school football is not, or recruiting is not important, because it still is, but you might in today's world say, you know what? I got a 5-star freshman at wide receiver that has never played a snap of college football, or I got this guy that was a 3-star coming out of high school, but he's had a couple 1,000-yard seasons at whatever school. Doesn't even matter. You know what? I'm going to take him because I think he's got a lot more experience. I think that's going to translate and give me quicker results. Because, again, that 5-star, as we've seen, that can take time to develop.
Right.
I'm always weary of 5-stars if they come from smaller schools that maybe you were just really good because you played against bad competition. And everybody was a foot shorter than you and 100 pounds lighter, and you just dominated because of that. Like, there's a lot of factors to why guys maybe don't transition well to the next level at college. There's also the development that you're going to have with every guy transitioning, that if you get a guy out of the portal that's just played a lot of college football and been in those situations, you don't have to worry about as much.
Well, there's the element of just learning the college lifestyle, right? Like, you remember when you went to college, navigating, going from your dorm or whatever to just shoot where the cafeteria is, learning. I mean, to go back to being 17, 18, 19.
And being on your own for the first time.
Right, exactly.
That's a whole, we all remember that experience of being in college, like, oh, hey, nobody to tell me when to go to bed or what to eat or anything like that. This is great. All those high school guys are experiencing that.
So you bring these guys in for an immediate impact, and those guys, and plus, then there's the element of the strength and conditioning program. And while I'm sure there are schools in this state and in let's say Texas or a few others who have elite level strength and conditioning, college-esque type, the nutrition, the strength and conditioning, you getting a guy who's played 4 years of college. I don't care if it's at Texas State or Ferris, what is it? Ferris State,
Ferris
I
State.
believe. With it, South Carolina's got a guy coming in, Dane Arnett, I believe. Is it Dane Arnett?
Correct.
That's a difference as compared to coming, no offense, to Dutch Fork High School or Dorman High School or James Island or Lexington. There's a difference in that.
Yeah, your body is going to be ready to play college football after 3 years compared to a guy, and I know Preston brings this point up a lot, that was eating pizza and Pop-Tarts for meals. Is probably not the lean, mean machine that he needs to be. And again, you get these guys on campus in January, and you spend the next 8-9 months getting prepared, getting their bodies right. And we saw the transformation of Dylan Stewart going into his freshman year and what he ended up looking like. And obviously that translated on the field. But, you do have to do those things for guys coming out of high school that you don't for guys coming out of the portal.
803-404-6100. So a little bit of discussion there. We'll come back, review everything from the day, and close shop. South Carolina also bringing, we have not gotten to it, and we'll try and get to it very briefly. South Carolina bringing some new guys in on the analyst roles for the offensive side of stuff. We'll tell you about that. You're listening to the Halftime Show. Wrapping it all up on your Tuesday, 2:48 to be precise. So for a couple of you, just a few more hours to go, and then we'll turn you loose into the Tuesday night sky and college basketball tonight. Tyler, should be a good night of college basketball. College basketball really now starting to heat up. Mentioned it to open the show. Kind of phasing out of football now. The wild card weekend is over. One college football game left. How many football? Did you say 7 NFL games?
8. Well, 8 total games when you count the college football playoffs. So 7 NFL games left. I don't count the Pro Bowl. I'm not watching the Pro Bowl and whatever that game has become now. So yeah, over the course of the next 3 weeks, you got 8 meaningful football games left, and then that long, cold off season until September this year, because the season starts a little bit later. So, yeah, buckle up.
Some good college basketball if you want to get into it tonight. Virginia and Louisville at 7 o'clock on ESPN2. I always enjoy watching Pat Kelsey's ball club. They're fun to watch. Louisville, a great basketball environment. Boston College travels to Clemson. Clemson now ranked number 22 in the most recent poll. That game up at
your favorite team.
Yeah. Go Fighting Brad Briles tonight. Boston College there against Tigers. Tigers. I did not look this week at the most recent bracketology, but the Tigers looking at another tournament trip. SEC action tonight. A&M and Texas A&M traveling to Tennessee tonight. That game will be 7 o'clock. Tennessee now 24 in the nation. Late tonight, you get Alabama and Mississippi State. Alabama currently sitting at 18th. That'll be on SEC Network. And number 19, Florida, your defending national champions, taking on Oklahoma tonight. Some interesting games to kind of get into if you want to. Also, a really big one, and the team that's ranked might surprise you if you haven't been keeping up. 9 o'clock tonight, ESPN, number 2, Iowa State. That's right, number 2.
Mm-hmm.
They travel to unranked Kansas tonight, Fog Allen Fieldhouse.
Doesn't feel right.
So good night. Good night of college basketball. A couple other really good games taking place as well. Number 3, UConn, and number 25, Seton Hall. Also a game of ranked opponents. Today, we talked a lot about the offensive line. We've also talked about culture. We went down a path on culture, and I put out a Twitter poll, and it'll continue to roll, and you can go and vote. But I put out a Twitter poll that I'm kind of interested in. It said, myself and Tyler Head are debating whether your locker room culture matters in college football anymore, given the year-to-year nature of the sport. Do you believe culture is still a big factor in winning at the college level? 76% so far saying yes, 24% saying no. Not that I disagree, but I think that number's high. I'm surprised it's that high because, look, man, I just think it's hard. I don't think you can coach culture. I feel like it takes time to develop. And, Tyler, when you got guys who are coming in for 1 year and kind of hanging around and they might be gone or they might be off to the NFL or who knows, it's hard to, I think, have your culture take roots in 1 year.
How much of the culture is solely in the lap of the coach, though? Like the specific head coach? Because there's a lot of people in that building, and you can't one person can't control it. They set the tone, obviously, but
you set the tone. I think it's 100% on the lap.
You think it's 100%
I think it's
on the lap of the
100%.
coach?
Here's why. It is a trickle-down effect to your assistant coaches. Okay. Your assistant coaches have to be on board with your culture and your mentality, and one person undermining you can ruin that whole culture.
And the thought would be you would hire people that kind of align with your way of thinking, the way you run things, and all that stuff.
One person, and the buck stops with the head coach. And so it's the head coach's responsibility to put all those coaches to hire and bring in people who align with his concept of and culture of what he wants. And then that is trickled down to the players. But it is hard. It is hard, I think. I mean, look at Jaylen Brown, who gets injured. How hard is it for last year, Sterling Lucas, to impart the culture? And, the way that things have kind of played out, you wonder if Sterling Lucas was heavily invested in the culture, or was he invested in the culture because that was who was paying him a check? There was a lot of people who said at times, Will Muschamp was a great employee, but only to that school that was writing the check.
Yeah, he wasn't doing it for free.
Right. And so, I don't know. And we brought it up because, as Tyler made a good point earlier, buzzword culture seems to fit college football now. And you look at Indiana, and it's like, look at what Kirk Cinetti's done. Boy, that culture is something, next to none.
And we just assume that good teams always have good cultures. That's not the case. And, you brought up the point about, Urban Meyer and his time at Florida. I would even say his time at Ohio State. They had bad culture. You look at the stuff that went on with the assistant coach there, with Zach Smith and all that kind of stuff, and the suspensions and all those kind of things. That was not good culture. They still won. and a national championship, no less. You can have bad culture and still win. You would hope that you'd have good culture, but I would say the culture is good here. And again, there's a lot of ways you can look at that, ways you can determine that, and hopefully it continues to be that.
Yeah, and again, we brought that up because the question was basically, do you rethink the culture now that you see so many guys on the offensive line transferring out? No, I don't think you do. I don't think you rethink the culture, but again, maybe you rethink if across the board culture matters as much as it used to.
Their position coach was fired. The
Right.
guy that brought them here, that was responsible for bringing all those guys here, was fired. Like that, I think that has more to do with it than anything else of why a lot of those guys decided to leave.
So we've discussed that. Also, Tyler has given the numbers on the offensive line as we dug actually into the guys on the field. And right now, the numbers do not support South Carolina bringing in guys who fit the scheme. We talk about fitting the culture, fitting the scheme, but that doesn't mean that they're bad fits.
Fitting one aspect to the scheme, and that's playing with a lot of tempo. Most of these guys don't have experience in super high tempo offenses. Doesn't mean they're not going to be fine within Kendall Briles. This is just of my investigating these new adds to the team. That's something that stood out to me.
So we got a lot of that that we've discussed today. We'll be back to do it all again tomorrow. I hope you're having a great day. Get into a lot more items tomorrow as we slowly work our way away from football season. A sadness envelops. We'll get into South Carolina, Arkansas basketball tomorrow. Look ahead to that South Carolina, Texas women's game on Thursday night. And plenty more, Tyler Head. That's right. All right. For Captain Dave, for Tyler Head, I'm Bill Gunner. Y'all have a great Tuesday afternoon.